All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Wheel Talk. We are, you can see, joined by Michael Longfield. He is the new, as of May, the new executive director for Cycle Toronto.
Yeah.
And a leader in Midweek as well.
Midweek Cycling, president of Midweek.
Yep, president of Midweek.
Yep.
OCA.
Was on the OCA board, not anymore though. Yep.
And what is that other one?
Velo Canada Bikes.
Velo Canada,
yeah.
yes.
Nice. Yeah.
Nice.
A lot of bicycles, yeah.
Very involved in bicycles.
Yeah.
Deep in it.
Yeah, he's a fan of bikes.
Yeah. They're okay. Yeah.
All right, so we want to start this off by just getting your background. You know, what got you started? How did you get so involved in bicycles and in the bicycling, I guess, field, industry, community?
Yeah. It's not a very linear path. I wasn't a very athletic kid. As a kid, I rode my bike all the time. So grew up, in Whitby outside of Toronto, and my bike was my main way of getting around, a lot of kids, right?
Yes.
So was biking all over the place. There were lots of ravines and that sort of thing in Whitby, and would just bike all the time. And then a lot of people, turned 18, 19, went off to school and kind of stopped biking. When I got to my mid-30s, I was decided to go back to grad school, and I was living in Parkdale and got into York, and sort of thought, this was before the subway had been kind of built out. So I was kind of thinking how am I going to get up there? And, tried the bus and took it once or twice, and it was not awesome. Yeah, it was not an awesome trip. It's a really long trip. And then was chatting with a friend who said, oh yeah, I went to York and I used to bike up there. Yeah. And I was like, what? Bike? No, nobody could do that. That's 14 kilometers. Nobody could bike that far. Yeah. That's impossible. But she wasn't a very fit person, but she insisted she did it. So I bought a beater bike and I started doing it. And, even on my crappy bike, it was faster than taking the bus, and I kind of got hooked on it.
Attaboy.
And then, a lot of people did a charity ride, did the Ride to Conquer Cancer, and did that on, again, not a very good bike. Went out for the first day. It was 100 kilometers, and it took me 5 hours, and I was really tired, and got
fast.
back.
Still,
it was okay. Yeah, it was okay. It was okay.
5 hours.
That wasn't meant to be a humble brag. It really was. It took me 10 hours. Let's cut that out. Let's say it took me 10 hours. It was really, really long.
Man, mine took 8.
Yeah. But then on the second day, rode out, and there was a group of these spandex wearing people. And they let me kind of ride with them, and they showed me how to do pace lines, and it took us less than 3 hours to do that. And it kind of went off in my head. I was like, oh man. Yeah. So Googled bike racing and found Midweek, and so got more into the sports side, and also at the same time was getting into more commuting stuff too. Ooh. So joined Cycle Toronto as a member, and just kept really kind of being in this space, and have always been really interested in kind of taking the recreation side and the transportation side, and to me they really are related,
absolutely.
And so that's kind of been a big thing, and it's it sort of brought me to where I am now.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Jeez. So I saw a picture on your Instagram, something from 2019 to now. And I love that it was just before the pandemic, but obviously you've been cycling for all your life. So what happened in 2019?
Yeah, so after this kind of switch over stuff, biking became my main way to get around town. Yeah, and was working a job. So I live kind of the west end of Toronto, and was working at a job at up at Eglinton and Don Mills, at the Aga Khan Museum, before I started working at Cycle Toronto, and was biking up there. And as I was almost pulling into work, I was hit from behind in the construction zone, and knocked off my bike and knocked unconscious, and just left lying in the middle of the road. So this was in 2018. Oof. And woke up, and there were paramedics standing around me. Yeah. I found out that there had been a driver who'd been behind, who saw this happen and got out of their car and was stopping traffic from driving over me, because I was lying unconscious in the middle of the road.
Holy moly.
So it was pretty fucked up. Yeah. Fortunately, didn't break anything, had a really bad concussion though. And so that story was the 1 year anniversary after that collision of me getting back and commuting on my bike again.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's really cool.
That's awesome.
And so again, it's a pretty shitty thing to say, but like way too many people kind of know firsthand that, you know, this really great activity, this thing that should be like really open and available and accessible to people, you know, on some extent, you're still putting your life in your hands when you're riding your bike. And it really brought that home for me. And so, you know, now being at Cycle Toronto, like that's always first and foremost in my mind, right? That like, you know, riding a bike shouldn't be an act of courage.
Definitely.
Yeah. That kind of partially answers, I guess, one of the questions that came up for me, because getting involved with Cycle Toronto is like a different level step, right?
Yeah.
And that riding the bike and having fun on the bike and having friends and all that stuff, that's one part. But then getting involved politically almost is a very different kind of game. So how do you feel about that? Like, how are you doing at Cycle Toronto? How's things?
So it's definitely been an interesting time being at Cycle Toronto. So I originally joined in 2020. I took a 1-year contract to be interim executive director. The then executive director went on, was having her first child, and so she went on parental leave. And so, you know, I kind of came in and we, you know, like in January 2020, and they kind of had an operations plan, and they sort of said, okay, you know, like, you know, maybe we'll get, you know, we might get bike lanes a little bit further west on Bloor, and maybe we'll make some progress on Yonge Street, and maybe we'll get a little bit of progress on Danforth. And, you know, it was like, okay, great, I can do this. And then, you know, pandemic hit, and, you know, just to sort of jump ahead, like, Toronto, like a lot of cities, really started reprioritizing active transportation. And, you know, at Cycle Toronto, we were able to really help push the city and kind of guide stuff. You know, then we had this expansion of bike lanes and that sort of thing. And, you know, of course, at the same time, the city was doing things like, you know, the active TO road closures and that shit. And, you know, one of the things that really resonated with me at that time was this idea I'd kind of always had in the back of my head that I talked about, that, you know, transportation and recreation don't have to be separate spaces. These communities can overlap, and you really saw that with active TO, like just the number of people that were out there riding their bikes, kids, families, people new to riding a bike, people kind of rediscovering it, learning. And it's just like, again, just such a, you know, an amazing moment in, you know, an otherwise really challenging time for a lot of people. You know, there was nothing else for a lot of other people to do except ride bikes. And so, and sort of seeing how that kind of became like a bit of a gateway drug for people too, to kind of realize, hey, I can go down and ride my bike at Active TO and Lakeshore, but, you know, maybe I can also ride my bike to go to the grocery store. Maybe I can go, you know, pick up those, you know, we kept talking about like essential trips. You know, maybe I could go do that by bike. I didn't have to take my car, and especially when the roads were quieter and, you know, things felt a little safer and calmer. It felt really transformational. And, one of the, you know, now that I'm back at Cycle Toronto as of May as an executive director, really trying to kind of harness that moment and kind of, I guess, push back, I guess, against a lot of what we're seeing, where this kind of like, I think there's kind of a tension right now where there's like a big push from people who want to like go back or return to what it was. Like, we want to drive more, we want more cars and that sort of thing. And rather than sort of trying to move forward this other way, where we had this glimpse that things can be different, like our cities can be different.
And the possibilities, that's like, we can do it.
And it doesn't have to take a global pandemic. And it doesn't have to be cars versus bikes. It's just, people want to live, you know, they want more livable cities. They want to enjoy public spaces. They want to be able to go to parks and ride their bikes, and again, take their kids out and not worry for their lives. So really inspired by that at Cycle Toronto now.
Because that's crazy. That was one of the things I wanted to touch on is active TO. You know, like, why did that stop?
Oh,
and are we going to get it back?
I mean, I certainly hope we get it back.
Or how can we get it back?
I mean, big thing we can do to get it back is talking about it like this, right? Like acknowledge that it happened. Like, you know, like I sometimes feel collectively with the pandemic, some people kind of want to just push it away, like it didn't happen, and not talk about it.
Good things came from it.
A lot of great things.
There was lots of shitty things, and, you know, again, like bikes in public spaces, like lots of potential, and like, so talking about active TO and saying like, hey, I missed that. That would be really cool. You know, something that we've talked about internally was, you know, I get it that the city's not going to close Lakeshore West, you know, every weekend all summer. Like, maybe that makes sense. But certainly doing it a little bit more regularly, or maybe tying it with other events, right? Like when you do the Toronto Marathon, closing down Lakeshore West for that, and then it ends at noon. Why not just keep it closed for the rest of the day and let people come down and use it, like stuff like that.
Like, just keep that closed for the rest of the day.
Well, there's that. Just the day and every day, just make it a bicycle expressway. Yeah. So things like that, like, and again, talking about it, like, and sort of, letting people know, like, hey, do you remember CycleTO? That was a lot of fun. Wouldn't it be awesome if it was back?
Yeah. I'm sure we can find, like, even if it's not Lakeshore, right? Lakeshore is perfect. It's fantastic. But Bayview is also a pretty good option.
Yeah.
Like
Eglinton wasn't being used at all at some point.
Yeah.
Eglinton was
we could have just shut that whole
Eglinton would make a really good, like, mountain bike course type of thing. Exactly. Hopping over construction zones, that sort of thing. Going down tunnels, and who knows what's going to happen. Yeah.
That just sounds exciting.
But is that really the main reason why it stopped? It was kind of like, all right, pandemic's over, let's get off our bikes and back on the cars.
I think that was a big
back
part.
On the road kind of thing.
I think that was a big part of it, and I think a lot of elected officials felt that pressure from the other side that we've got to keep traffic moving, got to keep cars going, and this type of thing is just a luxury. And I think we saw last summer with the kind of pushback around the High Park stuff, a good example that actually, no, we're still out riding our bikes and people need public space, and we've got a great space for people to be outdoors and to be safe and to have fun.
Yeah. There is definitely something to be said about the political will, because even now with High Park, there were people that were protesting.
Yeah.
Like what, last week?
Cars.
There were like a dozen people there with their cars and changing hats. If you saw some of the media clips, and on some level I get it. Like there are very valid, just to pivot to High Park, there are very valid concerns around High Park, around accessibility and
absolutely,
but. Cars can't be the solution for accessibility needs. Like there are other things we can do. We can make the sidewalks wider. We can, ensure there are shuttles going around that piece too. And, like I go to High Park, almost every weekend to enjoy a bit of the car-free stuff. And you see people with accessibility needs walking or using strollers or mobility devices. Like the park is still open. It's still really vibrant. Yeah,
it's a bit interesting. So I've gone to High Park a lot. Born and raised in the city. Yeah. And I remember just kind of knowing to avoid driving into Hyde Park because of like the fact that other people are using the park this way. And so I wonder like where that entitlement comes from, that I have to park right next to the soccer field.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I know.
Like where does that come from?
Well, and I can't remember who. Someone made a good point on Twitter that like, we don't expect this of our malls, right? Like we don't go to a mall and then like insist that I need to be able to drive into the mall and pull up right into the gap. Like, the distance for a lot of people of like parking at one end of the mall, walking in and then going to whatever store you're going, it's a comparable distance to accessing
there's a lot of distractions.
That place.
There's a lot of distractions along the way to where you want to go.
Yeah.
At Hyde Park, people don't want to smell fresh air.
Yeah, I don't want to see trees. I don't want to see happy kids. Yeah,
and don't get me started on the
animals.
Hot.
Yeah, no, don't want to see that. Yeah,
so much grass. Like it sucks. I just want to get from my car to the metal bleachers and just be there.
Yeah.
Right.
What do they even need a zoo for?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Like with Hyde Park, are they keeping that whole like the speed limit on bikes?
So it's a bit of a work in progress. So the city is currently making physical changes to the park. So in a good way. Yeah, in a good way. So one of the roads, the southbound West Road, that's going to be permanently closed to parks, to cars rather, and they're putting up like flexi posts to stop that piece. And then Colborne Lodge that goes northbound, they're shifting the bike lane into the inside and making it wider, and then just keeping a really narrow vehicle lane. And they're shifting some of the parking as well. So
are they doing protected barriers too?
Yeah, well, it seems like it's not yet. It's a work in progress. We haven't seen exactly what they're doing. When they did the consultations, they had these really beautiful renderings of planters, and but it's not going to be that right away.
Right.
But they're certainly reconfiguring the park to help prioritize it for like active transportation and walking.
Good.
Yeah, so that's good. Wait, now I've forgotten. This was a segue from something that you asked though.
The speed limit.
Yeah. So the other part of this that they're looking at too is talking about doing pilots, early morning pilots for recreational cyclists, where they would.
I saw that.
Yeah. So hopefully, I mean, the theory would be they would address the bylaw around the speed limit, and then the 3 stop signs that are along the loop as well.
Yeah.
That obviously caused a ridiculous amount of tension
Those should
last
just be
summer
yield
with policing.
signs.
Yeah. Of course, they should be yield
Yeah.
signs.
Like
Yeah.
a stop sign at a park.
Yeah.
In a park,
Makes
yeah.
zero sense
Yeah.
to me. Like 0 cents.
Yes.
Like they clearly made that park for cars.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like it's the dumbest thing.
Well, the speed limit itself, the stop signs themselves, that's a good example of car-based infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah.
That, and again, bikes occupy this kind of weird status in the Highway Traffic Act where they're kind of vehicles. I mean, they are vehicles in the Highway Traffic Act, but they have all these exemptions.
Yeah.
And so, but in High Park, they're kind of caught between all of those exemptions. So you did have police ticketing people for speeding on their bikes. And of course, there was the, all the ticketing that happened with people that were like rolling stop signs.
Yeah.
And, often when you sort of saw that behavior, it was often fairly low risk behavior. Like this wasn't, a Tour de France style peloton blowing through like 60K. It'd be like 1 or 2 people kind of riding, slowing down, and then going at like 20 kilometers an hour. Like it's a pretty, slowing down when there are pedestrians or going around behind them or that sort of thing. So
The cars don't even do that.
yeah. So again, good example of like, a type of solution that's designed for, 4,000-pound vehicles.
Yeah.
Maybe isn't the best solution for someone on a 20-pound bicycle.
Of course.
Pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, people on bikes have responsibilities.
Yeah, of
like,
course.
again, we talked about this before we were recording. Like, if you've got protected infrastructure, you probably shouldn't be riding on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And if you are riding on the sidewalk because there isn't protected infrastructure, I understand that. But then you should also be cognizant of the fact that, there are pedestrians around and be mindful of them too.
Yes.
Yeah.
The solution should be the city should just build more protected infrastructure, and then
Yeah.
there's no excuse to ride on the sidewalk. But until that point happens, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I notice a lot within the city is like non-connected bike lanes.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Like those are the worst. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, here's a bike lane for a block,
Yep.
but then fuck off.
Yeah.
After that,
Yep.
like good
Just-
luck.
just
You
stop.
know what I mean?
Were you
Stop
thinking one in
writing.
particular, like one where you're like, oh man, this one's
Man.
this one kills me every time. Well, not literally kills you, but
Yeah.
Oh, like Avenue,
So Adelaide.
Adelaide
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, Adelaide is
Yeah.
a show.
yeah,
Yeah.
Because
It's
I
just-
had the pleasure of trying Adelaide right at that point where they were changing it from one side to the other.
yeah, shifting it to the north side. Yeah,
So there was at this time, there was no signage that this
was
is happening.
really terrible.
So I was in a bike lane
Yeah.
and saw another bike lane across
Of course
the
you
street.
did, yeah. and you were in like a strip of paint.
Yes.
To be honest, as
Just
if you
paint.
had those like low walls things.
Yeah.
Right, saw some paint there, and then you saw some paint on the other
Yep.
side. Yeah.
And the cars were just as confused.
Oh, of course they were. Yeah.
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 That's so. There's kind of two things that kind of come from that. Sort of think about right away. One, Toronto's really built out its downtown network since the pandemic. Like,
Yes.
Again, one of the
Yes.
good things that's come out is Toronto has a downtown network now. It's not
Yeah.
done, but it's at least got the
getting
spine
there.
of it. Yeah.
College is a good start.
Yeah, and the upgrades that are happening now on
Downs.
College. The fact, I bike down here on Brunswick Borden, like you've got
Yeah.
that nice
Yep.
contraflow, like
Yeah.
really great stuff. So what's becoming apparent, as you suggested, are the gaps in the network now, right? Like
Yeah.
it used to be, we had so few bike lanes that the gaps were just everywhere, but now that we have more of them, those gaps are more apparent, and you can kind of feel like, oh man, if this could connect to this, it would just really be good.
Yeah.
Like Wellington, the upgrades on that, and it just kind of ends at Spadina and spits you out there.
Yeah,
like
I
that,
just saw that.
Yeah,
And
like-
at the other end. it
yeah,
just-
yeah. So it will connect eventually,
Yeah.
but like right now, you're just sort of left with this like, it's just dumping me
Like,
out
where
of
do I
this
go?
like
Yeah.
4-lane highway.
Yeah.
And then the other part is, as you suggested too, we've got this great network, at least on paper, but it's not fully usable because of the amount of construction that we have right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's tragic's maybe too strong a word, but I think it's a real loss for Toronto that they built out all this infrastructure, they've connected all these neighborhoods with
Yes.
with bikeways, and we never got a moment to enjoy it all. Like
Yeah.
it was sort of, they happened, and then we immediately got into this big construction season. And the construction's happening for good reasons. It's transit projects. The Ontario line finally getting built. A lot of these construction projects, like up on Bloor, are tied to the fact that they're going to. Bloor's a gong show. Yep. But eventually we're going to get like raised, separated bikeways there too, and like protected intersection. So it's it's happening for good reasons. Yeah. But we're not prioritizing people on bikes. So we're not really able to use it.
There's no like redirect.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, single file.
Yeah.
It's like,
figure it out.
But it's like, if I'm coming from a bike lane, and then all of a sudden it's like, there's a car ahead of me in my bike lane, and it's like, what the fuck? This guy's trying to speed in front of me. I'm like, bro, like, you know what I mean? Like, let me, like, we're going to go to the next stoplight.
Yeah,
like, it doesn't make sense.
We're gonna get there the same time.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
We're both gonna roll up there the same time.
Exactly. It's either that or it's we have our lane. People use it for construction.
Yep.
Dump their construction equipment. Parking,
staging. Yeah.
It's like, man, like, just let us have fun. Like, let us move around the city.
Yeah.
Because what do we do after that? It's like by Castle Frank, just after Castle Frank.
Yeah.
On Bloor.
Yeah.
That little construction thing that segues you into the middle of the road.
Yep. Traveling back westbound into
Yeah, it's like, how do I get around here? Like, or even going eastbound as well.
Yep.
Because late at night, I come from work, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, I'm trying to get past, and I have to wait. I have to cross the street and wait for the light to turn.
The roads merge with the bike lane.
Yeah, at that because point. I'm like, all right, I have to wait because there's a bunch of cars behind me. If I go and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, they're probably drunk.
Right.
And they're probably not going to care much.
Yeah, or they're drunk or they're texting or both.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I wait for the light to turn red going west or going east, and then I go.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a waste of my time. I'm worried. Like, I shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
It's like, just keep it protected.
Yep.
Or at least have space somewhere else to move construction.
Yep.
And just make it more designated.
Yeah.
There's literally a park right there that you can put construction equipment in.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? It's not going to bother anybody.
Well, and the other thing, I think with, maybe the four of us, like, we're all like, fairly confident, experienced cyclists, and, we're noticing this shit and we're feeling like, stressed about it or noticing it's a challenge, from Cycle Toronto's perspective as well. Like, we're trying to advocate as well for the people that aren't already biking or that want to bike more. So how are we supposed to convince people to like, hey, leave the car at home and maybe try, doing your, your next grocery trip by bike if we're asking them to bike through a construction zone? Like, nobody's going to make that choice. Yeah. And so, the city has really ambitious targets on paper to do this kind of like modal shift, to get people, walking, taking transit, biking, but, they're not doing the, the small obvious things to make that possible. Yeah. And again, going back to it, even when they expand out the cycling network, if it's not usable, what good is it? Like,
exactly.
If you can look, at a map and sort of see like, okay, like theoretically there's this bike lane here, and then you ride out to it, it's like, nope, not really usable. Where am I going to go now? I don't know.
Yep. And the crazy thing is,
I'm going to go home and get my car. Like, that's what I'm going to go do.
It's on Google. Yeah. Like, the Google has bike lanes that you can see.
Yep.
And then it's like, all right, I want to go here,
but
if I have to go a little bit more north, I need to go east, and then north, and then west, and then it's like, why does it have to zigzag?
So I guess one of the things that I noticed almost immediately in like in the move over to Hamilton, is that living here in Toronto and riding around in Toronto, I'll admit that I didn't. For a lot of the time, I didn't pay as much attention to where the cycling infrastructure was because it was so disjointed.
Yes.
And I lived up in North York near Downsview Park. And so, like, we don't really have bike lanes up there. And then getting into downtown and out of downtown, I don't bother looking for it. I just ride with the cars. So I get out to Hamilton, and I notice that there is a noticeable effort to have protected cycling infrastructure throughout the whole city. So there's a few roads you can take to cross the whole city. And I don't have to worry about riding next to the cars and trucks and stuff like that. And so one of the other things that I noticed, though, is that to get there seemed to be a pretty clear pipeline from, say, a person that's riding a bike, sees something, wants to say something, contacts currently Cycle Hamilton, and then Cycle Hamilton goes and advocates on their behalf. And it seems to happen fairly quickly. So is there like a similar avenue in Toronto, really, where if somebody sees something like a bike lane that doesn't make sense, or maybe have a suggestion for where one should be, and then
Oh, for sure. Definitely, like Cycle Toronto, sort of taking those things all the time. Constantly looking at the existing network. Where the next bikeway can connect to that. Think of pockets of the city that are like kind of like cycling deserts right now, where there is no connection, or there are other pieces to go. And also, like it sounds boring, but it's also a matter of like letting your local councillor know, like writing that email and type of thing. Like those things do matter. Councillors do listen when people say things, and often when things aren't moving forward politically in the way people want, it's because the louder voices, the naysayers, are the ones shouting louder, and they're the ones complaining about things. So always, if there's connection you're looking for, or sort of an idea for a route or that sort of thing, like Cycle Toronto, and or just letting your councillor's office know and letting us know too. Like it does make a difference.
Yeah, awesome.
Like a lot of the existing network that got built out during the pandemic were routes that Cycle Toronto had been talking about for like over a decade, of like, hey, prioritize Yonge Street, do Danforth, extend Bloor further west, do Avenue Road. And so, they became really obvious when the city knew it was going to start expanding projects really quickly. That became the low-hanging fruit of like, oh, well, we know the community wants these ones. We know these will have a high amount of usage to justify taking away that lane of traffic. And you see people using them all the time now. That's awesome. It's been good that way.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Because I guess like the people riding bikes, maybe they don't all the way understand what that advocacy actually did to them, right?
Yeah.
So kind of letting them know that like this thing's here because of us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, again, it's also understandable, like being politically aware, knowing who your councillor is, like it takes work, and or keeping track of what projects the city is or isn't considering, and when consultations are happening. Like it's a lot of work, and from my perspective, a big part of Cycle Toronto's job is to be doing that work on behalf of people, like make sure we're reading, like, okay, when the council agenda comes out or committee agenda comes out, like, okay, we're reading through the whole thing to sort of see what's coming up, and then either reaching out to people in that community, like, hey, there's a project coming in your neighborhood, there's a consultation coming in 2 weeks, y'all should go down there and just at least say, like, hey, this would be good, like I would like this, this would make it easier for me to get around town, this is really good. So yeah, doing that kind of work, because the city's a big crawling bureaucracy, and it's hard to understand, and so I think that's a big part of our job, is helping make that a little bit more accessible for people.
So Michael, in order to improve the communication between cyclists and their needs, how can a new cyclist get in touch with Cycle Toronto and communicate their needs?
I mean, certainly, one of the easiest ways to even just sort of get in touch is just through social media. So whether it's through like Instagram, Facebook, or the site that used to be called Twitter, I don't even know what it's called anymore.
I think it's just an X now.
I think it's just an X now. Yeah. I think you can let Elon know, and he'll let us know.
Yeah.
But like that's kind of the lowest barrier way to do it. We do respond to that sort of thing, and then it might be a matter of emailing a member of staff or myself, or getting in touch. Like we'll sort of follow up that way as well. But that's kind of like the lowest hanging fruit way to do it. Also, if we're out at a community event, letting someone there know that you're kind of interested in stuff, we'll sign you up for our newsletter and get you going that way too.
Cool. So, like, I guess in doing all of that, are you guys like super busy, just taking in all of that?
It's a little busy. Toronto is a quite a large city. Yeah. And, geographically, I think that's one of its challenges in terms of its cycling. Like, it's a big footprint. And so, and there's a lot of the city that needs more cycling infrastructure. I think it's only about like 4% of our roads have some kind of cycling infrastructure. So yeah, there's a lot more to do. And, especially if you're not downtown, like if you're in Etobicoke or North York or Scarborough, there's a lot that needs to be done. And so, so it's a lot of work on our part. And, frankly, on city's part too, trying to keep track of all that and plan out the next stuff.
Yeah, I bet.
So from what I was reading from the news part of the website, you guys are also kind of involved with electric vehicle strategies stuff.
Yeah. So
tell us more about that.
Yeah, so CycleTO, I think anyone who's been out on a street in the city knows that there are lots of different types of vehicles, personal vehicles that are on our streets. From CycleTO's perspective, I think pedal e-bikes have been like a real game changer for people. Basically a bike with an electric motor and a battery that you still have to pedal to kind of go. Those and like e-cargo bikes have just been like real game changers for people. And I think we've seen people kind of reconsider having a second car, and they realize like, hey, maybe I could use a cargo bike instead to kind of change that thing up.
Good,
But there's also been a bit of a plethora or explosion of all these other types of vehicles too. And it's not scooters, mopeds, electric motorcycles that are all kind of crammed out and on our streets, and they're not all necessarily regulated. You can buy them in like random places. The provincial government, the federal government doesn't really kind of control who owns all this. So, we're trying to talk to the city about, coming up with like a strategy of like, how are all these types of vehicles, going to share our streets together? And, it's not just something we're seeing in Toronto. If you look at any major city, there's all these vehicles out there, but certainly there's a lot of potential. I think getting people out of single occupancy vehicles, like getting people out of one person in a car or an SUV or a pickup truck, ultimately is what we need to start doing more in our cities. But at the same time, we can't just start dumping everybody onto an e-scooter or a moped and say, okay, here you go now too. Especially if we're expecting them to share our very meager amount of cycling infrastructure. Hopefully we're optimistic the city will come back with a strategy that will include, expanding our cycling network even more, maybe making our bike lanes wider so it's easier to pass, or not have to feel like quite as scared if someone on e-bikes passing by you on your left or that sort of thing too. So
or even making the lanes smoother. Like a lot smoother.
More maintenance work.
Maintenance is an issue. Maintenance is definitely an issue.
Because Canada.
You know what I mean? Like,
we happen to be where the potholes are.
Often. The sewer grates, potholes.
Or even like on Bloor, especially. I think it's by Bay just by Bay and Bloor. They just have these planters out there that are not secure. Mailboxes that are not secure. I thought mailboxes
sounds like a
were secure.
311 problem.
No.
You know what I mean? It's like I thought mailboxes were like nailed down to the ground.
Yeah, there's just sandbox in the bottom.
And you, I'm sure you've seen this too with the kind of quick build infrastructure that the city does, like when they put those curbs with the flexi posts, or even the low walls. If a truck or an SUV hits them, like they'll move them. We'll knock them all over into the bike lane, and then you have that problem too.
It's like planters. There was a planter just last night that was just like kind of tipped over.
Yeah.
And I'm on my skateboard, my electric skateboard, like coming home from work. I'm like, all right, I can ride over this with my bike.
Right.
Yeah, but the skateboard.
Like
a little tougher.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
really
like, all right, let me
gotta
move
learn to ollie,
over to
baby.
the sidewalk a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's like, they have, like, if they're gonna put those things, they need to make sure that it's actually secure, because we just seen a video the other day of a car over a Jersey barrier.
Oh, the
SUV.
Yeah. And
Like,
then people were trying to push it sideways.
Like how do you get up there?
I know.
Yeah.
And the car wasn't even like near the edge or like near the front.
No, he's pretty deep.
He was deep in the middle of that Jersey barrier.
Yeah, he wasn't like he just got up a little bit. It's like, I can keep going. Maybe I'll get the whole way over.
It's like, how are you gonna get there? Like, but cyclists are the problem, though.
Oh, of course,
of course.
We're
the problem.
That's why we're
exactly.
It's all the cyclist's fault on that one for sure.
It's wild. It's like I don't know. The city can definitely do a lot more.
Yep.
But it's also people's like personal responsibility and accountability. And I get there's cyclists on our end that are reckless. It's like, how do we advocate for cyclists when they're out there doing the wild shit? You know what I mean? Like cutting through cars, weaving through cars, lights, pedestrians. Like, how do we get people to come onto our side to help when we have people like that just doing that?
I mean, the thing I always kind of try to remember about this too is it's it's not about a mode of transportation. It's people when they're on roads, like whether you're walking, biking, driving, like you have responsibilities. Like we don't tolerate people just walking the sidewalk and like body checking someone off to the side, right? But at the same time, there's not like there's probably assault charges, but like we don't have to like overly legislate that too. It's also like, okay, you don't freaking body check people there. And I think one of the big problems to kind of we kind of keep thinking about is as you kind of move up this the scale from like walking to biking to driving to being in an SUV to being in a Ford 150 to being in a transport truck, just the risk or the consequences of your bad actions just becomes exponential, right? So often there are people on bikes who maybe ride around a little bit recklessly or carelessly, and often though the consequences of their actions are nowhere near as severe if that person were driving or doing something else.
100%.
And often, as we kind of know, it's the person on the bike who's going to get really fucked up in that kind of crash too. So that's kind of the big part.
Or cause a crash. From cars behind them.
So it that's always a big part of it too, and it's why we think like bikes can be a big part of like our urban transportation solutions. Is that even when people make mistakes or behave recklessly, the consequences of that is much less than if they were driving a vehicle. And then if you combine that with better education, better encouragement, and just giving people the space they need to move around, generally you start seeing better behavior in that way too.
Yeah, I think the education piece is a pretty big one because it does a couple of things, right? There are people that genuinely don't know the rules of the road on a bike,
or in a car,
right? People that just don't know. But also, I feel like when you show the attempt to educate, then people that might not necessarily naturally be on your side can at least see that attempt, right? And so, maybe it might encourage some people to be a little bit more sympathetic when it comes to cycling and cycling infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, for Cycle Toronto's perspective, we sort of talk about the three main pillars of our work, and it's advocacy, education, and encouragement. And that education piece is a really big part of it. From our perspective, it's not about victim blaming. It's really about empowering people on bikes to sort of know these are your rights and responsibilities when you're on the road. And when you look at jurisdictions around the world that have much higher levels of modal share than we have in Toronto, often at a school level, at elementary school level, they have they're teaching kids how to ride bikes and teaching them the rules of the road too. So
which we don't have here.
And we very much would love to see that sort of thing. Cycle Toronto does sort of case by case, class by class, community center by community center.
You guys have learned to ride.
But seeing it at a board level across the city, I think would be really transformational.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. What would it take to get there?
Again, like a lot of things we were talking about, political will, right?
Political will.
And people
are you running for premier soon? Or?
How about
guerrilla
tactics?
I was gonna make a greenbelt joke. I was like, how can I personally benefit myself from the greenbelt stuff? And then maybe. Yeah. Okay. So now you have good material to incriminate me if I do, and
Clip that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
No, I was thinking like guerrilla tactics. Ask the community, said, hey, can we do
So we do that sort of thing, and it's finding something that we've definitely felt from Cycle Toronto is, historically, this organization was started back in 2008, really out of a sense of frustration back then about how slowly the cycling network plan was getting rolled out. I mean, the city's had lines on a map drawn of where the bike lane should be for like 20, 30 years. Like it's no secret for where these bike lanes should be to your point. So, and obviously, in those 15 years, we've seen a lot of progress, and obviously there's still a lot more to do. But historically, we've been kind of a, sort of downtown focused organization. And really, especially with the Learn to Ride program, we're really trying to pivot into being able to do more work in the inner suburbs. And a key part of that is working with community partners who sort of know their communities, right? So rather than Cycle Toronto coming out and saying, we're going to teach you how to do this, and like is working with other groups like, in Rexdale, in Thorncliffe, Flemington, or in Scarborough that already have those community connections, and really making a partnership to help address the needs that, and the challenges that people are having in their own communities about what they need to know, and where they would like cycling infrastructure as well. It's a super fun program, and it's always amazing to see little kids get on the bike for the first time, and even with the Learn to Ride too, it's often some adults who've never ridden bikes as well. Yeah. And
do you guys provide bikes?
So we have some partnerships with we do provide yes, the short answer is yes. For the sake of the Learn to Ride class, we do. And then we're helping support this really amazing organization called the Women's Cycling Network. They're based out of Thorncliffe and Flemington, and they do a bike match program. Okay. So like people can donate bikes, and then you can sign up to get a bike, and they'll help find people their bikes that way too. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's really, really great.
That's really nice.
Say that name again.
So it's the Women's Cycling Network.
Women's Cycling Network.
Yeah. And they have a bike match program. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's
very
sweet.
cool.
So you guys provide bikes. There's a bike match program.
Yeah.
And you guys teach people how to ride a bike.
Yep.
Do you guys teach people how to ride like in the neighborhoods, in the street, or in like a park?
Most of it is at this level. We've really realized with this first phase of it is there's a big need to kind of even just get people going and staying upright. So like doing 3 sessions just to get people comfortable getting on the bike, being able to pedal, move in a straight line. These things that you take for granted.
Real fundamental steps.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we make a joke about things that's like, oh, it's like riding a bike, but it's
how do you?
It takes a while to get that. So what we're sort of hoping with future phases of this is we can start doing more like, hey, you know how to ride now. Here's how you ride your neighborhood, and running group rides or encouraging local organizations to run group rides as well is like a big part of that too.
Yeah, we're kind of into that part.
Yeah. No,
that's one of the things we do.
It is.
That's a lie, actually.
That might be our core business.
But do you see that? Like, do you end up having people like really different levels of like comfort?
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
totally. The last couple that I did out in Hamilton, actually, I noticed that a lot of the people asking questions, you could tell from the questions that they're asking, they like really want to get on the bike, but they don't know how. In a way that they don't know if they can just get on the bike and ride downtown.
Right.
Yeah.
So they'd rather get a group.
Yeah.
So that as a group.
Yeah, it's a little safer.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels a little safer.
Safety in numbers.
Right. So I have totally found that like on some group rides you'll have some racers.
Right.
And then you'll have some people that this is their third time on a bike.
Right.
Yeah.
And being able to like ride together with a group like that, you can actually see it on their face how happy they are that they can actually do this thing.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my God, I did 15 kilometers today.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, again, like that was me going to York, right? Like not thinking 14 kilometers was even possible on a bike. Like it seemed as impossible as like a Tour de France stage.
Yeah.
And it's even for people that's like never like they've gone on a bike not too much, but then they get on a bike nowadays. It's like they see a different part of the city that they've never seen before, even though it's right there.
Yep.
Because they just never hop on a bike.
Yeah.
Right. It's like. That kind of aspect is like, hey, you can get to different places very like easily if you just ride a little bit,
Yeah, there's so
join
much
a
cool
group
shit
ride.
to see.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so many things to see in the city.
Yeah. Well,
so many things.
I'm sure you see this with Cycle Hamilton as well as, like riding a bike through a business area, compared to driving, like, driving, you may not have the chance to see the cityscape the same way.
Yeah.
And so, studies have been done that, when you build bike lanes, despite concerns from business owners that business is going to go down, it actually doesn't.
Right, you're getting more exposure from people that can pay attention.
Yeah, so like, hey, I didn't notice that place before.
Yep.
And you get people doing like more, like maybe fewer big shopping trips, but more smaller trips, and still business is usually going up.
Yeah, that's very, very true.
Yeah.
And even from my own experience, of like driving forever and then starting to ride bikes more and discovering things that I probably should have discovered before.
Hey, I could stop there. Like, oh, what's that place? Yeah. And I don't have to like drive around the block and try to find parking. Like, just here, lock up, go in. Yeah.
So what are some things that an everyday cyclist can do, let's say from the Cycle Toronto perspective, to try and help build infrastructure in the neighborhood, or let's say, be a stronger advocate, what could someone who's not an avid cyclist, but at least they're favorable to that, what could they do?
I mean, I think honestly, a really big thing is just helping, like, encourage other people to ride, right? Like, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is, if you're someone who rides already, is you can be a bit of an ambassador for people around you. And if you have a friend who's maybe kind of interested, or a partner or something like that, like, maybe like, hey, I'll schedule a ride with you, or like, hey, do you want to try going to the park together? Let's meet here and we're just going to bike 2 kilometers and go down that way. Or I found this really great route. We can do that.
That's how this club started.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. And again, so like
I ended up in spandex.
Yeah. So, so like, these aren't secrets, right? Like it's really sort of, these things that, we've all realized about riding a bike is helping like share that piece, and just sort of realizing that, with, good infrastructure, riding a bike can just be a really normal thing to do. Like, that you don't need a special bike. You don't need to wear a special jersey. I mean, you can choose to, because that's also awesome.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be a prerequisite to get out on a bike. You don't have to identify as a cyclist to be somebody who wants to get around on a bicycle. It can just be something you do, and it's because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Even to get started, like $100 bike, $50 bike, just get on it.
Yeah.
Get on it, explore your city
Yeah.
as much as you can. Ride that bike till it's broken.
Yep.
Probably next month. But at least you got around. You got to do it. And then invest in something if you want to.
Yeah.
But the point is, I always like to advocate, just ride.
Yep. Oh, definitely.
Just hop on something. Get on something.
And
I joke around about it, but it's like, dude, I started out on CCM, rallies, super cycles. Like, it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all went through that phase at some point.
Oh, of course.
You have to.
Right. So, and now we're here.
There's a famous saying, like, don't squat in $200 shoes with a 10-cent squat.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So don't go riding a bike for the first time on a $1,000 bike.
Right.
If you don't really know how to get around.
Yeah.
Because that could cost you even more.
Right.
And it's like, learn on something. Don't be intimidated by, I don't have a nice bike.
Right.
Like, yeah, but you have a bike.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have a bike. That's great.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes up sometimes, and this might be like a creature of the media, maybe, but like there's a negative connotation to being a cyclist.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so there are some people that have told me that
cyclists look like that guy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right there. That
Exactly.
guy.
Well,
The hat, right?
actually,
The jersey.
again, like cyclists look like this guy, right? Like
Exactly.
it's a white middle-aged guy,
Yep.
who like
lives
downtown. Yeah. And then there's the other side. So there's the cyclist, and then there's the mammal, right?
Right.
So there's the lycra cyclist. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but okay, yeah. But go on.
Yeah. So it's like, I noticed that I hear that often enough.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I started paying attention to as we're riding as a group is what the public is doing around us.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the interactions with the public are extremely friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, people actually bring their kids out.
Yeah.
And they're like, waving at us.
Yeah.
Mostly outside of the city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is not a Toronto story.
BT dubs.
This is a Hamilton story.
Everyone
Right.
hides their kids
Right.
from us.
And so when I started seeing that people are bringing their kids out to the front porch because
Yeah.
the group is riding through.
Right.
To me, it's something that other cyclists are seeing.
Yeah.
And it's making them more comfortable on the
Yeah.
streets because they know, people actually like us.
Yeah.
As opposed to what you will read in the Spec or what you'll read in
Right.
the Star, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, a big thing that I like, I really try to go back to a lot is, I ride my bike for lots of reasons. I rode down here. I commute by bike. I, road race very poorly, but do that. I ride the track. I've got a cyclocross and gravel bike. I'm out there in lots of things. And at the same time, I think it's really important that, again, people don't have to identify as a cyclist to choose to be on a bicycle. Like, ultimately, you're a person on a bike.
Yes.
And being a cyclist can be an important part of your identity if you want it to be. That's cool too, but it shouldn't have to be. Like at the end of the day, you're a person on a bike, and I think as long as we're remembering, these are people. Like, when you're in a car, like not thinking about that thing as an inconvenience, that's a person on a bike.
Yeah.
And I think that in of itself would just help really shift a lot of how too often people talk about cyclists.
Yeah.
The media loves its labels.
Yeah, that's true. And, they love a good conflict. And, we sort of saw that with the recent Toronto municipal election. There were people running and, they were going to pull out the bike lanes and really concerned about, or bike lanes where they make sense. But if you ask them where it makes sense, they can't actually tell you because they just tell you, well, not there, not there. So where? And
Go
they
on
don't
a
have
park.
it. Right. Yeah, nowhere. But you can't, not Hyde Park.
Exactly.
So park, but not so park. Okay, so Hyde Park. No, not Hyde Park. So it's like, so nowhere. You're saying nowhere. But
drive your bike to somewhere and
out of the city. No, but you can't drive your bike to somewhere because then you're biking out on the highway and you're like, you can't bike anywhere. But despite all of that sort of rhetoric, we saw with the recent mayoral election that despite these big names making a lot of fuss about pulling out bike lanes, they got less than 15% of the vote.
Exactly.
Like, I think a lot of this is kind of normalizing. I think people are kind of accepting that safe cycling infrastructure makes it, not only better for people on bikes, it makes it better for drivers. You don't have to be quite as stressed when you're beside somebody going, you've got your space, they've got their space. It, makes things just move smoother and better.
Yeah. I mean, in my head, I imagine like a person on a bike is one less person in front of me.
Of course it is. Yeah. It's one less car, man.
So it makes sense to us, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. And I think it's shifting. Like, I think it's slowly starting to shift.
Good. I was wondering about that because I know what side of the issue I'm on, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, obviously, it's like I'm seeing this more and more.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if, generally speaking, if the general climate is shifting.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to look at this with like rose-colored cycling glasses.
Ray-Bans.
I've got my Oakleys. I can put them on later. But we paid way too much for them. They're amazing.
I hate that they're not prescription.
Oh, mine are. So
really?
Yeah.
Nice.
You gotta give me a link
I
to
know.
that.
Yeah.
I know.
No, that's. Oh, yeah.
I got coverage, so I can.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, we'll chat about that one offline. But yeah, again, I think the recent Toronto election where these candidates, despite kicking up all this fuss, got so few of the votes. I think it is showing that things are changing. Yeah.
Okay,
that's good.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean we take our foot off the throttle.
No,
it doesn't mean we go, okay, great, we're done now. Like, if anything, now's the time to kind of keep pushing and really keep telling people that like, this infrastructure, more people on bikes is a good thing.
So Olivia Chow's pro bikes?
She rides a bike. She's been riding a bike for, goodness.
Does she have a license?
So there was this. This came out in the election. Yeah, this came out. She apparently does have a license.
She does have a driver's license.
She apparently can drive a stick. But she just chooses not to drive most of the time. And
I remember hearing the story that she doesn't have a license.
Yeah,
just drifts on the track.
Yeah, that turned out to be a bit of an overshoot on the media piece.
Yeah.
When she won, she since corrected that.
Okay.
But she's been using a bike for most of her urban downtown transportation for like
she got the bike with
years.
the flowers on it.
Oh
and
yeah.
Okay,
And it was really exciting when Cycle Toronto organized a ride on her first day in office. Yeah,
saw that.
And she came out and joined us, and we all rode down together, and it was pretty super dope. Yeah,
huge.
It was
pretty cool.
That was awesome.
See, things like that are really cool to see.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of outreach when it comes to other cyclists seeing what Cycle Toronto's doing.
Yeah,
that kind of thing is awesome to see.
And hopefully seeing someone like our mayor riding a bike is helping normalize it more, right? Like, maybe I can do this too. And it wasn't like a 50K trip or whatever. It was like a short 2.5 kilometer trip, getting from up at Bay and Bloor down to City Hall. And I think that's the big thing too with cycling in the city. Like, for too long, I think there's been this kind of like bike to work mentality. And I think for a lot of people, maybe biking to work isn't like a good option, but again, for a lot of your local trips, bikes can really start replacing a lot of that. And then maybe you start doing that more. Maybe you do start thinking, we'll start biking to work or not.
Paul, what were you saying?
Commuting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The idea of riding to work.
Yeah.
And there's also this kind of thought of like using bikes as like the last mile.
Right. Yep. Huge
for
one.
commuting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So What's the relationship with like Toronto Bike Share?
I mean, bike share is just like, just a really, been a really transformational for Toronto. It's obviously gone through some ups and downs. It's currently being run by Toronto Parking Authority, which again has some pros and cons to it too. But overall, the program, I think it's really helped make, riding a bike, just especially downtown, like a better option just for those types of short trips. To be able to be that kind of first or last mile piece like that. So Cycle Toronto does do a lot of advocacy work with Bike Share to, get more stations closer to transit, and then help build out the network in the suburbs too, where it's a bit more piecemeal.
How often are those bikes like maintained and washed, cleaned?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
not fully aware.
Because
I've definitely ridden some like junkers. I've done that. I've done that. Like you grab a bike, you go, and you're like, "This isn't good." And you get to the next station, dock it immediately, grab a new one.
Because there's the Naked Bike Day. I've seen some people on those things. And it's like,
and I don't see any Purell.
None. None. And then it's like
the sun's a good disinfectant though.
Their bike is like. Where they hide it, you know what I mean? So I just want to know like how often they're.
It's a good question. I don't have the answer to that.
Sanitary thing, like for me, number one, when Bike Share first came out, what was it called?
It was Bixie.
It was Bixie, and you had to have like a $500 deposit just to take it out for 30 minutes or something. Is that still the case?
No.
So how do you operate those now?
So,
for people that don't know.
So
like myself.
There are two ways of doing it. One, you can just kind of like pay as you go with like a credit card, and so so you've got your credit card on there that if something happens to the bike, they've got that. And you're paying it's like whatever it is, it's I can't remember the hourly rate, or the 30-minute rate, it's like $3, $350
or 7 for the day, I think.
And they've got day passes too. The e-bikes are 10 cents a minute now. So you don't have like, so with a regular bike share, you pay your $350 and you have the bike for 30 minutes. Like you can kind of go as far as you can go on it, and and if you keep it longer, you start getting charged more than that. But for most trips, it works out. With the e-bikes, they're currently charging you 10 cents a minute, so it is kind of incentivizing you to kind of get on it, go to where you need to go, and dock. The other thing is you find you're using it a lot is just to buy an annual membership. It's like I think it's about $120 a year. And that gives you unlimited 30-minute trips. Which can be really handy if you happen to live or work somewhere where there are lots of stations. It can be a really great way just to make that first last mile piece.
$120 for the year.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used it. Well, last year I used it a lot because living uptown and then having meetings downtown but in different buildings. So just take transit down and then city bikes between meetings. Right.
Nice.
So I probably could have paid the membership because I think I spent more than that.
I mean, it's less than a month of a Metro Pass.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's not anything Presto related.
No, unfortunately not. That's something. I mean, I think there's some really good things that we're on the cusp of doing. Like if bike share were better integrated with transit or vice versa. If you're like, if your 2-hour transit window included, you like, hey, I could also use a bike share for part of it.
Right.
Like stuff like that would just be total game changers.
That would be game changers.
That would be great.
Those bus transfers. Wow, that would be amazing.
So like things like that.
Buses.
Things like that would just just really bring it up a notch.
Speaking of buses, what's up with them like only having one rack?
Or
they have
two.
Space for two.
Yeah.
But then
the other one is sealed.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So they only have one. It's the one closest to the to the
wow.
bus.
See, this is why it's good.
So you fold it down, and then one of them is like barred off.
That's not good.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I don't know what is up with that.
Yeah.
TTC. Why would you do that?
Paying you for, yo?
Why would you do that?
When did you start noticing that?
A few years ago.
Wow.
A few years ago.
Wow.
Because it'd be like, I'd wait for a guy because I had a flat.
Yeah.
There's a bike on it, and then I look over, like try to put it on. It's like, I'm looking at the driver. He's like,
I'm like, explanation.
Okay, I guess I'm not going home.
Yeah.
Like, you know? And there's no room inside.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the point of that?
I'm sure you've been that guy who's like trying to sneak a bike onto the subway.
Yeah.
Like rush hour is ending, or it's just maybe I can get it on
It's
there.
not that busy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I see too many bikes.
I don't want to be that
Sunday.
guy in the middle of rush hour in the kit.
Yeah. So I've been lucky living on the line on the like I guess the Yorkdale line or the Wilson line, right? So I've been lucky to live on that line. It's a bit closer, it's a bit quieter.
Yeah.
So I can get away with getting the bike on at St. George.
Yeah.
But not before.
Yeah.
Good luck.
So, gonna make it to St. George and then hop on.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good luck.
Yeah.
So then I guess we're talking about last mile stuff. So in Hamilton, these bird scooters showed up and
God.
that's been
Yeah, you
Awesome.
guys are
All
starting
right.
from this year.
Now, hold on. I'm going to take notes on this one.
Yes.
All right. Here we go.
Because
All
I
right,
have a note on this one too.
How is that going?
how's that going?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take off my Cycle Hamilton hat
There you go.
and speak as just a citizen.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get the idea, right? It's a cool little thing that you can just hop on and take your last mile and pretty quick. And they have a map that shows you where you should ride and where you can't and all that. And they have a sign that says "Don't go on sidewalks."
Whoa, rewind. What is
Aside.
this?
The
So
bird
bird
scooters. Like the electric scooter.
So like rental scooters.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so they're parked on.
Are they dockless or do they have docks?
So they're dockless.
Right. Okay.
You just
so
chuck
cur-
them on the ground?
Yeah, pretty much.
Currently,
Oh,
they're
wow.
parked on bike, like on bike locks and on bike bars.
So they're. I'm gonna be nerdy on this. So they're dockless, but they're locked too.
Exactly.
Right,
you have to
okay,
lock
right,
it to
right,
something
yeah.
and then show the
So
picture.
this is part of the research
Right.
that we're doing now on this like
Yeah.
EV stuff. Yeah.
So then you take a picture of this thing locked to
Something.
currently
Yeah.
bike infrastructure,
Yeah.
Yes.
and then
which we've got plenty of,
That's
so
the
that's
only
not
way
a
you can
problem.
close that.
Yeah, that's tons of bike parking, so no big
Yeah.
deal that scooters are.
so a
taking
couple
that
of things came up immediately with the scooters.
up. Oh, yeah, I bet.
One being that you can only use them in the bike lanes,
Right.
Oh.
and so interesting for bikes.
Yeah.
Right? You can't use them on sidewalks. People have
Which is-
tried and
yeah.
it just shuts off.
Oh, really?
that works okay?
Some places it
Yeah.
works
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
That's a really
Really
interesting
shuts off.
GPS,
Yeah.
man.
So if you end up on a spot where you're not supposed to have this thing,
Yeah.
it just shuts off.
Damn.
And then you have to and then it gives you something on the screen that says like an X across it, so you
You're
can't.
riding, just
Wow.
like a hard stop, flip over
I've seen
the
that.
thing.
I've seen that in the US.
So
with
the engine it just shuts off.
Yeah.
That's so
It can't-
crazy.
It's like a yeah.
So also noticed that the network that you can take this thing on, it's not that big.
Right.
I think it's only Ward 3, Ward 4, Ward 2,
Right.
and maybe somewhere up mountain.
Right.
Which I don't know if I would take this thing up the escarpment.
Right.
My heart wouldn't.
Right.
You're gonna be walking, bro.
Right.
Yeah.
I've seen people walking it.
Right.
Right. Pushing it up the Ketty Trail. I've
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
that.
Busted.
But another thing that we noticed is that the driving public doesn't care for it too much.
No.
Oh dang.
And the walking public doesn't care for it
Sure
too
don't.
much.
No.
And for cyclists, a part of the issue in these wards where they are allowed is that because you're liking it to bike locks,
Yeah.
Where the bike's going.
we don't really have
They don't have
a
enough.
lot of
Yeah.
those.
No.
So they're taking up space.
Right.
Dang.
So these are the things that have come up so far.
Wow.
And as far as I know, Bird hasn't really said much about it.
Right.
They're dropped 100 or 200, and there's another couple that are coming.
Right.
And
That's
as far as we
crazy.
know, it's just going to keep coming.
Right.
That's
Dang.
crazy.
That's gonna be
So
madness.
there's been a lot of usage, though.
Yeah.
That is the thing. That
Okay.
people are actually taking these and using these, and they kind of like it, but everybody else around them doesn't like it.
One of the
So-
one of the stats I sort of heard about these scooters share systems is that often they're not replacing car trips; they're replacing walking, biking, and transit trips.
That's exactly
Yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah.
it.
Because
So
the
it's not
range
actually
on them is
solving the
not
problem
good.
we're trying to solve.
Exactly.
It's like more just dividing this group that's already not driving,
Right.
And
just
but not
adding
solving
more
the
shit.
problem we're trying to solve.
That's exactly
Yeah.
it. And so, I think officially, Cycle Hamilton, we haven't really made a statement. In
well, you
terms
would
of
know
our
you're not
opinion.
talking on their behalf right now.
That's
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
If they were talking,
Yeah. Yeah. If
they
they were.
haven't
Yeah.
decided.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've used it. Right, I had a pretty okay time with it.
Trader.
I didn't mind it.
Yeah.
But you're right that like the fact that I used it
Yeah.
instead of using my bike.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So it is just splitting the same group that we've already.
See, in the States, those bird scooters, I think it was in Texas or something, their main issue was that they were just being littered.
Yeah.
California.
California.
Yeah,
People
They're
were
just
literally
throwing them in the river.
riding them,
Yeah.
leaving them on the sidewalk.
Oh yeah.
Because they
because
have
they
an
don't know where to-
incentive
They're
program
done. Yeah,
where you
You
could pick
drive
it up
around. Yeah.
and charge it,
yeah,
and then they pay you to charge it.
yeah.
So that's how they get charged. So
that's
when
wild.
people just leave them everywhere, and there's other people that are scavenging them to charge them.
So they've got all, depending on the jurisdiction, the scooters have all these different models of how they're used. Like sometimes you can just dump them anywhere, and there's that. People are then incentivized to pick them up, charge them, and move them somewhere else. Sometimes they have docking stations, like the Bixi or Bike Share ones.
Yes.
And then the more common one that's coming up now is this Lock2 system. Yeah.
So Hamilton said yes to this like a while back.
The pilot,
but it just showed up. I think Oshawa was one that said yes.
Oshawa definitely one was.
Of course they would.
And but Toronto said no.
Toronto is still pending. Yes, we did a no back in 21, and then it's being reconsidered this fall or early winter.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I'd be curious to see how that works in
topic.
Toronto.
Yeah.
Seeing what's happening in Hamilton, I'd be very curious to see what.
Well, you noticed I was making mental notes on this.
So please tell me how this goes
You
in
don't have to
Toronto.
make mental notes. It's recorded.
I know. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I'll just keep rewatching this.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's there's noticeable issues with the integration with like the rest of the public,
Right.
and
So we're
the
gonna see
education piece is also a little bit lacking.
Yeah, I mean, I think anecdotally, if there's one thing the average person hates more than a cyclist, it's a person on one of these scooters. Yeah,
Dude, the worst.
I think if there's it's so how long have they been in Hamilton?
They showed up in I want to say June
Okay.
because it was after Bike Day.
Okay.
Yeah, Bike Day was June 1st.
Right. So June
I'm
2nd.
scarred.
June 2nd they rolled out the scooters.
Just for one day.
Yeah.
Bunch of scooters just locked up
It
on
was
bike
like
lots.
maybe a week after, and it just showed up.
Right.
Although I heard from someone that they had like a launch event, and
Right.
I just wasn't there.
Sure.
But they just one day they were all there, and people were riding scooters all over James Street, and cars hated it.
Were they causing havoc like
Oh yeah, that first
like
day was
mopeds in Vietnam? Just like the whole like
that first day was something because
Wow.
people didn't know about this shutoff feature. So like, people are on the scooters, right?
Did they just
funny, but
did
it's
they just
funny.
power down or did they stop?
No, they power down.
Okay, so you're kind of like going.
Yes, you're going quick.
You
Right,
gradually.
Can you
Yes.
imagine that
Okay.
Peloton
Okay.
going, woo!
Yeah.
Because even for me, like when I was on it, and then I got on James,
Yeah.
and I was on a part of James where you're not supposed to ride it, but there's a part later on James where you
You
can.
can.
So I got on this part, and then it just died. So I'm like, oh, it's probably the battery.
Right.
This fucking thing's shit. And I pushed it,
Yeah.
and then it came back
Scooter
on.
style, like
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
kid.
like
Yeah.
real scooters.
Yeah.
And then it came back on. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's solved. And then went off again. It kept doing that, like on and off. So I
Damn.
saw other people fiddling with the same kind of issue, but we're in James Street, which in Hamilton, James Street is like a busy street. So, yeah.
So how do you know where you're supposed to ride? Like where do
So
you
you have a
see
little
this?
thing. There's a screen,
Yeah.
Okay.
and the screen will either show the scooter in like a green check mark,
Yeah.
or it'll give you that circle with the X across.
Yeah.
Oh, but there's no like.
There's
Oh no, you have to download the app to see.
Yeah.
Oh,
if you want to
okay.
see where in advance, you need
yeah.
the
I was
app.
gonna say it's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
you just take it and guess kind of thing.
Right. So I was guessing. I didn't know
Shit.
about the map
Right.
on the app or whatever, right?
Shit.
So, it's interesting to see how this goes.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll compare notes for sure because
Yeah, because that's crazy. Because one of the things that one of the conversations is licensing
Right.
EVs,
Yeah.
like PEVs, I guess, personal electrical
Yeah.
vehicles, or whatever. How would that work if they're just allowing not just e-bikes but now e-scooters to be rented out?
I mean, generally with these types of like small personal vehicles, licensing is usually a really bad thing and a really bad slippery slope to just increasing more enforcement, to making it harder for people to choose to use these things. Certainly if it's a larger, again, like an electric motorcycle style thing with more than 1,000 watts power, like you're starting to get into something that's not a bicycle or not a scooter anymore. Like it's a motorcycle, and that's where you start or like actual like mopeds. Like there are licenses to use a moped. There's a reason why. It's the weight, the power, and these other things. Smaller bikes or e-bikes or even these sort of electric kick scooters. Generally licensing is a really bad thing to do. And we're really disappointed right now in the city of Toronto. They're even considering a kind of they claim it's not licensing, but it's that food delivery people, couriers would need to have an identifying number on their vehicle so that people had concerns, the police or whatever could report them. And again, it's like, this is just a bad slippery slope to.
Meanwhile,
at the same time, though, but at the same time, it's.
Oh, here we go. So this is a good example.
Okay, so here's the thing, right?
This is interesting.
I was like, really?
Here's the thing. Yeah, me and Paul, like, yes. Because I personally, like, see them riding around, like, recklessly. Like, there's no reason for these people to be coming towards me when I'm on the road. Like, 1 foot out on the phone.
Right.
Like, how do I tell this guy, like, yo, don't?
Well, I mean, I think,
you know what I mean?
I think ultimately what we're seeing is, most of these people that are doing this, they're not just, independent businesses that are choosing to go around and deliver food, right? Like, they're, it's big companies like Uber, DoorDash, and those. And I, frankly, I think these companies are really abdicating their responsibilities in terms of the types of education, in terms of taking responsibility.
Definitely.
There's definitely a lot of pushback. They don't want to claim their these people are employees, so they're putting their hands up. But then, they're making, huge profits off of this, but then not taking any responsibility.
They're not taking care of the people that are doing the deliveries.
And instead, now cities are
sure.
trying to come up with these other solutions to deal with what ultimately should be happening, like, at this sort of company level, like taking on, like, hey, like, here's some level of education that we can give you. And again, it's about empowering these people to know riding the opposite direction in a busy bike lane is like, you're gonna fuck yourself up that way.
Or FaceTiming people. While riding around.
That's a really good point. That, like, these companies are really dropping the ball. Because I guess when you sign up to be a courier,
I was a courier once.
You're not getting. There's not that educational stuff, and so how can that be?
And there's no incentivization. Often, the faster you deliver, the more you get. So you're like incentivized to, like, fuck, I'm just gonna cut around like this person, or ride up on the sidewalk, or run through that red light.
Damn, I had no clue.
So, and again, these things are coming, from the companies themselves, and how these things are kind of being structured. It's similar to the issues around Uber and Lyft, parking in bike lanes or that sort of thing too. It's because those drivers are incentivized to pick up as many people as possible, to drop them off or pick them up exactly where they want to go. And then cities are kind of left scrambling for, like, bad solutions that really aren't solving the problems.
But see, I find the difference between the cyclists or like the Uber delivery people and the Uber drivers. You're a driver. You took a test. You know the rules of the road. You should know the rules of the road.
And yet, how many times
why are you on my bike lane?
Exactly.
Like, if you took this test, I don't care if that's your main job. I have no sympathy. I don't care if that's your main job.
Well, that person's making a choice that, like,
it's
fine,
like,
I know the rules,
get
but
the
I also
fuck
need to pick
off
that
my
person
lane.
up.
Right? It's like, hey, you know what? I want to take a rest on your driveway.
Yeah, they're not respecting the painted lane.
Right? But at the same time, there has to also be personal accountability.
Oh, sure,
and I 100% believe in personal accountability. So when the whole like serial number thing on their bikes, I personally go for that.
But then what would be the punitive step after? Like, fine, I reported this, right? Like, what?
Sorry, you're suspended from working.
And that's on the company level?
That's on whoever.
Right.
It'd be hard to it'd be difficult to enforce that at best.
And then like somebody behaving badly, like are you working or are you not working? Are you just getting between shifts or not? I think there are actually there are already rules around, and there already are rules around not riding your bike on the sidewalk, not blowing through stop signs. Like, there are things or red lights. Like, there are already things that can be enforced on these pieces. I think adding an additional level on this is really just creating more bureaucracy and frankly, creating more of a need for on-the-ground police enforcement on stuff that probably...
Or does it come through with the same thing that they're doing in New York,
right?
Where civilians can call or like...
the snitch line.
The snitch line, pretty much, right?
Jeez.
So civilians essentially can do the same thing to
delivery drivers too,
right? So it's like, hey, this dude just kept running red lights or like riding on the sidewalk. Here's a serial number.
And I think these are all great examples of the sorts of challenges that Toronto's facing that aren't unique to Toronto.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the really good things about, Cycle Toronto, Cycle Hamilton, and these other groups is like talking, like again, like these scooters, like talking to each other and finding out like, how's it? Okay, I read the news story, but how's it actually working out?
Yeah.
What are you actually seeing? And so that we're all not reinventing the wheels and pretending these problems are unique to us.
Right.
They're happening in cities around the world. And the more we can kind of talk about what are the actual root problems of this, I think the better off we'll be finding solutions.
I guess the Toronto police are also a little bit too busy ticketing cyclists on Shaw.
Yeah.
And not actually ticketing these guys who are just
Of all streets.
joyriding.
Yeah.
Gosh.
While on the job,
Yeah.
FaceTiming, clearly FaceTiming, and like, just distracted. If there is a penalty for drivers, there has to be a penalty for these people doing these jobs.
Which I guess there already is, but there's no enforcement.
I think there is a lot of enforcement. I think again, we talk about enforcement in general, like talking about cars that are parked in bike lanes. Like theoretically, there's enforcement, but how often?
Enough.
Yeah, and again, I'm personally not keen, and neither is Cycle Toronto, for us to then start saying, okay, well, I guess we need to more police and we need cameras everywhere monitoring things. Like, I think,
so with enforcement, I don't believe in police enforcement actively being out on the road.
Yeah.
I'm saying if we can incentivize the citizens, people, whoever, to be like, hey, if you see something wrong, it's not snitching, but it's like you live here, do your part. You want to be a contributing person to the society? Here's how you can do it as well. Yeah. You see someone doing something wrong.
What the?
A few episodes ago, we did talk about
Nomad tickets.
Our own tickets.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The Nomad tickets.
Yeah.
But
you're parked in the bike lane. Have a nice day.
Yeah. But like those stickers that don't, like you try to remove it, and the paper's just still.
The interesting one too with the parking in the bike lane, I think something that's really hard to wrap. Like if you don't already ride a bike and you're doing this, I think it's hard to put into a driver's mind that what you're doing isn't just an inconvenience. You're actually putting somebody's life in danger.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like again, you sort of hear from people like, oh, it's just a moment. Oh, just go around, whatever. It's like, but the
minute you go around,
you're putting someone in danger.
Right. There's a reason why this bike lane is here.
Their solutions don't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. If we have, just regular people out that, know about, hey, if you see someone, here's a serial number, take a picture, text it, like send it to this place, and then they'll get a ticket, or maybe not a ticket or suspension, but also like 3 strikes. Hey, 1 strike. By the way, we have you on camera. Somebody, that way it's not to essentially scare somebody. It's like, yo, do the right thing.
Right.
You live here. There's rules.
I think again on this, I think what I'd like to see first is again these companies take more responsibility for
of course that's the
and then
step.
start doing that, and then start like evaluating. Okay, how's that going? Like what kind of training program is Uber providing for these people? Mm-hmm. Giving them skills or education that they need to like ride safely, or let them know why these things aren't a good idea. I think, and then from there is start looking at other solutions after that part happens.
Yeah, because I know with Uber, like when I was doing it, you have hot spots.
Right.
So if you're not in that hot spot, you're like dashing to get there.
Right.
And then kind of like just circling around until you get some.
Yeah.
And then it takes you out of the hot spot and you're gonna dash back just to make more money, like $1 extra. And it's like, it's not a good look, but it's also, I don't know, man. I'm big on personal responsibility and personal accountability instead of like, that person needs to do this. Like, no, I should be doing something.
When I think that's why organizations like Gig Workers United are trying to like help change the classification of these types of careers into being employees, right?
Yep.
Like imagine like I'm not paid at Cycle Toronto by how many letters I write to city council or that sort of thing, right? Like I have a salary, and as part of that I'm expected to do these types of things. And similarly too, if careers maybe had a more dependable income that wasn't necessarily tied to how quickly they were doing these types of things, it does start shifting that kind of dynamic and re-incentivizes things in a different way.
Because taxi drivers under Beck, they can't just go around parking everywhere, even though some of them do. But it's like, well, even personal like restaurant delivery people.
Yeah.
You know, they're not trying to rush to you to get some, like, you know, they have, hey, 30 minutes or it's free.
Right.
So get there within that time. Oh, you're not in my district?
Right.
Sorry, I can't get to you.
Right, yeah, I'm not delivering it to you.
Yeah. You know, it's like having people like that, like for Uber Eats, it would be good.
Yeah.
It would be good. And then crack down on the people afterwards.
And, you know, and the other part of this too is, like, again, not just a Toronto problem. Like, you know, during the pandemic, I mean, I don't have actual stats, but anecdotally, definitely know that, you know, it seemed like more people that had that ability were, like, you know, ordering out and getting food delivered. And so kind of remembering too that, like, people are benefiting from the fact that there are all these people on, like, e-bikes and scooters and that sort of thing who can, like, bring food to you, like you call, or like even to get your groceries and do all that sort of thing. And so, like, again, like, people being aware that, you know, sort of your decisions as a consumer are also, it's creating this Wild West situation there. And so, like, okay, so how can we fix this from a bigger picture part? And, you know, the solution is we just need more people on bikes. That's really what it all comes down.
So everybody should just
buy a bike,
get your own
food.
food.
Get a bike.
Get your own food.
Get your own food and get a fucking bike.
You can ride the RV.
Now let's stop talking shop. Let's get to the fun stuff. Midweek cycling.
There you go. Yeah.
Sandra wants to know if a crit is ever going to come to High Park.
I would love to see that happen. I would really, really love to see that happen. Like in New York City, again, like, you don't have to freaking reinvent the wheel. In Prospect Park, in Central Park in New York City, not only are they car free, they have regular crit series.
Really?
Yeah, so they do them in the mornings. Like, they start at like 5 a.m.
Okay.
They're usually done by like 7, 8 a.m.
Perfect.
So, like, you know, most of the haters won't even know that they're gone. They're clear that it's there. Yeah. And
what,
like,
they
clearly,
were there while I was asleep?
Yeah. And so, like, you know, that's something Midweek's definitely talking to the city about how can we bring that kind of model to High Park.
That's
Again,
awesome.
do it in the mornings, do it when it's car free, you know, marshal it off, communicate well, sanction it, like, you know, make it legit, and then be there. And then by the time the first people start showing up for the baseball diamonds and tennis courts, we're already gone.
Yeah, legit.
Can I put a suggestion in for Downsview Park?
Ooh. Oh, Downsview would be a great one.
I think people are already doing that. That said, how does a
velodrome in Downsview Park would be
amazing.
How this is all just wishes now. We're just
you know, the fun stuff.
Manifest.
Yeah.
This is the safe space. So
it's online. Make it happen.
Yeah,
that's it.
How does a crit even start?
That's a great question. You know, I was lucky enough that when I joined Midweek, it was already kind of happening. So, like, you know, the start of, like, you know, I think back in the day, if you told me, hey, you have to start a crit in Mississauga around this industrial park, like, I'd have no idea how to do it.
Words,
you know, high level, like a lot of things, it requires, you know, someone with a crazy idea to, like, I want to do this thing. And then it's like getting local buy-in, and it's getting support from, like, you know, the councillor and city staff and whatever adjoining businesses are there or not. And
you have to get those approvals.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
To
sanction the event. Yeah.
I see
the
the
wheels
issue.
are turning. The wheels are turning.
So
there it is.
The High Park
BIA got it.
So the High Park situation, again, because the city's going through this High Park movement strategy, they're, you know, making all part of the roads car free. It is kind of, this isn't, you know, a High Park crit isn't something that's coming out of, like, left field. They're already considering these types of things.
Awesome.
It's not, you know,
like, we've been doing it. We just want to do it legally.
Yeah, it's not the city's idea.
Sanctioned race.
Yeah, it's not the city's idea to do this, but it's something that Midweek is definitely saying that this should be part of what you're considering doing, and we have the skills and the expertise to pull it off.
And so right now, we could say that, like, Midweek is talking to somebody on city council and saying, hey, what's up?
I think you could say that, yeah. Yeah, I think you could say that, yeah. Yeah. I'll even wear the Midweek hat on that and say, yeah.
So for people who follow the Nomads, who've ridden with us, our cycling club, and I use the term very loosely.
No, you shouldn't. Own it.
Is let's call it more social.
Sure.
How would you differentiate a club like Midweek?
Yeah, and even on that, Midweek is technically a club in the sense that we're a sanctioned club sport thing through the Ontario Cycling Association, which is the provincial sport governing body for the sport of cycling. So same way if it were like track and field or volleyball, they're the equivalent of that for like racing bikes. Midweek's a bit different than most other clubs. So, there are like, a few in the city, like Dark Horse Flyers is a great example. Morning Glory, Saddle Sisters, also like Freaking Aces, that are focused mostly on like group rides. So, meeting up somewhere, having a route, taking people out and then coming back.
Yep.
Midweek's focus is really focused on racing and learn to racing. So we, compared to other clubs, group rides are a much smaller part of what we do.
Right.
And instead it's running a learn to race series, a crit series, and then a cyclocross series. Nice. And people join the club because they want to be part of those events, and then also because they want to race their bikes together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's, especially since the pandemic and when we restart. So in 2020, we didn't have any events. In 21, we were the only races in Ontario we had 4 races of the crit. And really since then, it's just the kind of community vibe around the crit has like really changed and really become awesome. It used to, it happens out in Mississauga around this industrial parking lot. Yep. It's pretty dead, vacant space. And it used to just be bike racers racing there and then everyone would go home. It's become a bit of a spectator sport since then. It's pretty awesome. Cool. Yeah, there are people who come out just to watch it. Yeah,
that's really cool.
So we have 2 more this year.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed we'll make it out to at least one.
Come out to I'm not out at the next one, so come out to the last one.
Awesome.
In 2 weeks.
All right.
2 weeks. Yeah. Tuesdays.
Yep.
Okay.
Shout out to Roland on Mondays.
You guys, are there talks of expansion? I'm asking this selfishly because I want to do a crit at Bayfront Park in Hamilton.
So we can talk about that.
Okay, cool.
So Hamilton's got a pretty good a few bike racing teams and clubs there.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Ascent plays a big role, as I'm sure you know. They're our partner Midweek.
Yep.
There are a few members of Midweek who also live in Hamilton, so that might be able to happen.
Let's discuss.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
Awesome.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
We talked on our previous episode about doing like an amazing race, but for bikes.
Yep.
Do you think that would ever be a thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, and you guys should be the ones to do it.
Like an amazing race across Canada.
Yeah. It might be a terrible TV show. But
It might be a TV show.
It'd be a fun TV
Even
show.
the GTA would be,
the GTA would be good.
Yeah.
That would be really
Just
good.
like
Really
a
good.
massive alley cat.
Yeah, it'd be a giant alley cat, essentially. Yeah.
Filmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa.
The filming aspect would be the crazy and expensive part.
Lots of GoPros. As long as you had
that's
like,
true.
just hook them on, point them up at people. Like, I think it would work.
Oh, I mean, like filming them like the Amazing Race.
Right. Okay.
Like having a crew
Right.
with like each team kind of thing filming.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
And the race would be to just get from Scarborough to Etobicoke.
Oh goodness.
And still be friends.
It's gonna make a terrible joke. The winner is the person who doesn't die.
Deliver this oatmeal from Oakville to Scarborough.
Right.
Go.
And both of you are still friends somehow.
Yeah, so there are a lot of implications with that. I assume from an organizational standpoint.
Was the Amazing Race or the crit? Or both?
I feel like both.
Okay,
Both.
Yeah.
Like just to say, okay, we're organizing something to go across the GTA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a little bit. Again, if you ran that alley cat style, like again, people are allowed to ride their bikes, right? Like, and with a lot of this too is again. I'm looking at the camera and debating if I'm going to say this out loud.
I'll blur your face out. I'll blur it out.
Yeah, I can blur it.
So, from an organizer perspective, a lot of it has to do with your tolerance for risk.
Right.
So, again,
tolerance.
yeah. So that's all it comes down to. Yeah. So Midweek chooses to run its crit in a way where we have road permit from the city of Mississauga.
Oh wow.
We have approval from the local councillor. The local businesses all get notified that it's happening. We have insurance from Ontario Cycling. Everyone has to be a member. have a license. So like, we're checking all these boxes.
Right.
That is our level of risk with this type of event. But it also, from our perspective, ensures the event's longevity and success. That we don't have to worry about like, oh man, are we gonna get kicked out of here? It's like, nope, we're here, and as long as we keep doing all the things on this checklist, we're fairly confident we'll be able to stay and keep doing it.
That's awesome that something like that
We need to make this checklist public.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's awesome.
Amazing Race GTA.
Interesting.
Six Fix, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
Scribs,
You
looking
guys
at you.
you guys seem okay with risk?
Let's talk.
Yeah,
This is my idea. I'll sue you.
copyright. Yeah, copyright it out. Yeah.
I said it in the last episode.
Yeah.
I've
Okay,
seen
good.
you.
Okay, good.
Already.
Yeah, good.
We know a guy.
All right, good. Is Shalnut's gonna come help you out on this, or a different lawyer?
He's kind of a biking
Yeah.
lawyer, you know?
Yep. He's the guy we know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I know that guy. Yeah.
So, what can a general person like us
Yeah.
do to get into Cycle Toronto? Or like be a part of, Dave was talking about these wards.
Yep.
Like, how do we go about that?
Yeah.
We'd
So
definitely like to help.
yeah, I mean, honestly, y'all having me here is like really, I think, really good. I think one of the things we know about Cycle Toronto is not as many people know that we exist as we think it does. So like,
I didn't really know what you guys did.
yeah, exactly. So, y'all invited me here, letting me talk about it a little bit. Like that in itself is really huge. Kind of let people know, and they can go to, you could put it under me right now, like a CycleTO.ca, our website. You
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, exactly, right here. But yeah, like, depending on what level you want to get involved. So it could be as simple as like signing up for a newsletter and starting to see the kinds of things that are being talked about in the city. Also, as well, we do have like ward groups. So the city of Toronto politically is divided up into 25 wards, your local councillor in that ward has a lot of sway in terms of how that area kind of gets run and what type of infrastructure is or isn't being proposed. Whether it's the state of the parks to things like bike lanes, that has a lot to do with it as well. And you can start meeting other people that are also kind of interested in these things too, and start having the conversations about like, hey, where would I like to be able to bike? Like if there was a bike lane here, that would really change how I would get around my neighborhood. And like that's how Cycle Toronto started. Like it was designed to be this idea that people in their neighborhoods knew where the bike lane should go better than downtown city planners. And not that downtown city planners don't do really great work, but hearing from people in those communities is really, really important. And so having that kind of like, again, it's a word that's used a lot, but having that kind of grassroots connection is really important. So getting involved with a local ward group, signing up for our newsletters, and again, just helping spread the word that like riding bikes is freaking awesome, and you don't have to be a special kind of person or wear a special kit or hat to do it.
Yeah.
So Scarborough's come up a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember there was through the pandemic, there were some bike lanes that went up in
Brimley.
Cowan. I was shocked.
So many.
Stunned.
Yeah.
So
and then
many.
it disappeared.
Yep.
So if I'm from the East End, how do I voice my opinion on that? Or do I need to talk to someone from that ward? Or is there an organization that's already existing there that maybe as a new cyclist I don't know about?
Yeah.
How would I go about that?
So again, Cycle Toronto is definitely doing work out in Scarborough. There are a couple other groups as well. There's a group called Scarborough Cycles that's run out of Access Alliance, which is like a community services group there, and they do a lot of advocacy and education work as well.
Amazing.
There's a group called Toronto East Cyclists that's also looking at advocacy in that piece too.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and again, like with a lot of these things, it's again, it can seem a little intimidating, like oh god, how do I start, or like where does the bike lane go?
Yeah.
And just even connecting to some of these groups and realizing there are other people kind of talking about these things.
Oh wow.
Like right now, there are conversations about extending the current Danforth bike lanes that like end at Vic Park, extending them further
I'm on
east.
Vic Park.
Yeah. So there's conversations now about extending them further east to Kingston Road and putting bike lanes on that. So connecting with a group called Danforth Kingston for All that Cycle Toronto works with. Like they're pushing to advocate to make sure that project happens next year. Yeah.
Is there a list of these groups somewhere on the Cycle Toronto?
That's a great question. There currently is not. There are the list of the ward groups that are like official Cycle Toronto groups. We do have lists of some of our partner organizations as well. Then some of these are there.
That would be amazing. Yeah. Okay, cool. Very nice. Very nice.
But
good to know. Yeah.
Because there's I'm in the East End as well, like East York area.
Yeah.
And there's some places that could use some love.
Yeah, sure
like
are.
Coxwell, for example, just by O'Connor.
Yep.
I fucking hate that parking situation. Like by the LCBO where they're all angled and the driver's trying to come out, but he can't really see because there's blind spots covered by other cars. It's like, I'm trying to leave, bro. I'm trying to go down the street.
Yep.
And you're trying to back out and you can't see me.
Yep.
And that's a good example too, when you were talking about bike lanes that end. The north-south
O'Connor?
No, that has the I can't believe I'm blanking on this on camera. This is amazing.
I can skip this film.
I know, no, it's fine. They're the protected bike lanes just east of Coxwell.
Woodbine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So like Woodbine goes up to O'Connor and then just stops, right?
Yeah.
Like so
there's a shoulder, but
yeah. Like so again, good example of like the Woodbine bike lanes have. Now that the Danforth bike lanes connect to them, again, you've got this great connection now. And so there's more reasons for people to use that.
Yep.
But then if you're going north, then what do you do? Where do you go after that? And you get spit under traffic and you're dealing with everything.
And then O'Connor is just a shit show. That bridge.
Yep.
I don't even know if it's a lane or a shoulder.
Yep.
It's considered a shoulder, but
for what?
It's like
edge line.
It's like this big, and you're expected to kind of just be on it,
right?
And then as soon as you're over that bridge,
the road
that
is
little
garbage.
area, there's like potholes everywhere.
Yeah.
Like,
and there's a confusing thing from a cyclist perspective. Like that's a good example of it. Where sometimes the city will narrow lanes by painting them, which is meant to slow down cars and is a good thing. So they'll build these kind of edge lines. But then it's confusing when you're biking then because you're like, am I supposed to be in this or is this a bike lane or is it not a bike lane?
Another good example is Don Mills.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm coming home from like Don Mills and Eglinton area.
That's where my collision was,
And I Google it. It was like 8 o'clock at night and my light like fell off when I was riding. And like Google said, hell yeah, just go through Don Mills South, whatever. It'll get you to O'Connor.
Yeah.
And I'm on that bridge and I'm seeing like the highway and I'm seeing cars going this. I'm like,
you're gonna
am
die.
I allowed here?
Yeah.
Like, can I ride here?
Yeah. Because as a driver, when you're getting off the highway, you don't see anybody there.
Exactly.
So
exactly,
that's
and
crazy.
it's like, so I wait. They finally stop because there's a stop sign.
Right.
So I'm like crossing. I'm like, yo,
There's
where
no
do I
shoulder.
go? There's
Where
like, the
you
shoulder's
go?
a ditch.
Yeah.
I'm
you're going
walking on the
Yeah.
ditch. I'm
Yeah.
walking my bike on the road. I'm
Right.
like,
And you're going
alright.
uphill. By the
I'm
way.
going uphill.
Yeah.
People are going 70, 80.
Yeah.
It's like, yo,
In a
why
40
would
zone.
Google tell me I'm allowed to be here?
Google's bike routing isn't perfect.
It's not perfect.
It's the most generous way I can say that.
But it's
I actually see much
also-
worse.
A road
Yeah.
that we can ride on
Yeah.
technically. Same with Eastern, because Eastern turns weird.
Yep.
It's
Oh,
like
you can. I mean, as long as you're not on like a highway, like a 400 series highway or the DVP, you can ride your bike.
it's but the
can ride your bike.
confusing
Right,
part is for people to know that you can.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Because Eastern, I'm like trying to go through Eastern, and then it looks to me like it's an
Highway
on-ramp.
extension?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
It is.
like,
But
yo,
it's actually
turn
a really quick
around.
off
Yeah.
ramp.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it's I don't know what to do
Yeah.
in that situation.
Yep.
Because sometimes people like me, when I was younger, just commuting, trying to
Right.
get home, Google like that's
Right.
the only way we do things
Yeah.
now is Google. How do you
Yeah.
get home?
And then there like are some like routes that get you across. Like
Yeah.
there are the improvements on Dundas East that has the
Yeah.
bike lanes now over the DVP. That's really good. There's unfortunately there's all the construction down by
At the waterfront trail.
the waterfront trail. So you
Yeah.
have all these bizarre detours
Yeah.
that eventually will be good, but right now it's a bit chaotic. Obviously you have the viaduct, but then you've got that construction. So
Yeah.
even when you have there's stuff that you're talking about where Google will try spitting you out into really
Sketchy
bad,
areas.
dangerous
Just dangerous.
situations, and then there's infrastructure that's there on paper. But then if you were to choose to do it, like go over the viaduct, you're like, wait, now I'm in this construction zone and the lane's ending and I'm spit out into traffic, and now what I do?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, it's not easy riding a bike in the city.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, as comfortable as I am riding my bike, sometimes it's just like, I question myself, like, can I be on this road?
Yeah, that's the infrastructure telling you no.
Yeah,
it's like, can I be here?
In a really nice
Leslie,
way.
That's your will to live.
Yeah.
Telling you, like,
Pretty much,
no,
right?
forget the infrastructure. Yeah.
Like on Leslie, a bike trail will take you out and just shoot you into the road.
Yep.
And cars, cars are just like going by, and I'm like, how the fuck do I? The connection's like half a block down on the other side of the street.
Yes.
Yeah, especially
There's no crossing, and that bike lane is literally an alleyway into the. I'm like, yo, what the fuck, man?
Yep.
Like, it's so weird how it's just go here, please.
Yep.
You know. So I would definitely like to be on this ward and just.
We're gonna
push this shit.
Yeah, you're gonna be like the award advocacy president, and you're gonna like get shit done.
Oh fuck yeah!
Yeah.
Like, yo, I want to ride a bike safe.
Where's
I want
the
to go
sign?
home.
I don't want to die. Yeah.
I want to go home. That's all I want to do.
I know. No, that's again same thing. Shouldn't be an act of courage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you should be comfortable just trying to go home.
Yeah.
You know. But these wards, you say they're not really on the website.
Oh no, the award advocacy groups are.
Groups
yeah.
are, okay.
Yeah. So
The sign up.
yeah. So
Okay.
so they are, and again, the other piece, like signing up for the general newsletter. People want, they can join Cycle Toronto, become a member, $30 a year, $5 a month. That money goes help pay for the work we do. We're a charity, you get a tax receipt out of it.
Okay.
So if I'm gonna plug away and do that, but also it's just
Sign me up.
yeah, exactly.
Easy.
But then also doing that kind of helping out, volunteering, and just letting these things know, like, this is how the city makes changes, is hearing from people that like, oh, I would bike from here to here, or like, I try doing this and I feel like I'm gonna die. Like, that's how cycling infrastructure gets built.
Perfect.
Awesome. Yeah.
Verbatim.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually right here. Okay.
If anything, the challenge in Toronto is that there's way too many of these things, right? Like, it's not like we just need to fix these 5 roads or these 1-2 things. It's like, nope, it's like, it's
the whole
all
city
over. Yeah. And the further you get from the downtown, the worse it gets.
Yeah. It's crazy because, like, Vancouver, I think, has a perfect cycling infrastructure for a car-centric city.
It's doing better, yeah.
Than Toronto.
Yeah.
Like, Montreal as well.
Yeah, Montreal is really something else.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, they have full streets of just no cars.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's just bikes.
Yeah, they do the Summer Streets program,
Yeah.
which is amazing. And, because you've got all this infrastructure, you just have a higher amount of modal share. So you've got that safety in numbers. So even when Montreal isn't always like protected bike lanes, you'll just have more people on bikes, which, again, just like, okay, I'm not the only one here at this intersection. There's like 5 of us.
Right.
So cars will see me.
Exactly.
And the cars probably won't make a red, turn on the red because they can't. So that's also safer. So just like things like that really make a difference.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Is there a city whose cycling infrastructure you'd like Toronto to model? Speaking of,
Yeah, I mean, certainly from a North American standpoint, Montreal is often pointed at like as something aspirational for Toronto. And not that Montreal is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and of course Montreal has the analogous piece of actually having winters and having snow.
Mm-hmm.
So when people hear sort of saying like, oh, people only ride bikes 8 months of the year, it's like, well, maybe because there are no bike lanes or the bike lanes aren't cleared of ice and snow. But in Montreal, where they do those things, people ride year round. I think historically cycling advocacy has kind of looked, North American cycling advocacy has kind of looked to like Northern European cities, the Amsterdams, the Utrechts, and sort of said like, these kind of like, cities that have just, made really transformational shifts, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s to really embrace cycling. I think the important thing to remember from a Toronto perspective is, as amazing as those cities are, they're also much more sort of like monocultures.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things Toronto really needs to do as it's building out its network is just taking into account there's lots of different communities, different types of needs for cycling, and really listening to the community in terms of how they're building out the network and what they're prioritizing, and not just sort of coming top down and saying, here's your bike lane, use it.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're getting near the end here. Let's have some more fun. What is your favorite route, or like, I guess, ride?
Ride or routes?
Let's say route.
Route, yeah.
So I'm gonna answer this in two different ways. I'm gonna say route, and I'm gonna first highlight. I love Shaw Street in Toronto.
Yes.
Okay.
Like
Yes.
Shaw's awesome.
Shaw is
Yeah, it's
really one
bliss.
of the jewels
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Toronto, and
That's a good one.
it's one of my favorite things about it is there's often a slogan in cycling advocacy that paint is an infrastructure.
Yeah.
But Shaw is a great example that if you do everything right, paint can be infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you control car volume, if you do the direction changes, if you make the lanes the right width, if you make sure it's paved, if you have connections, if you get that volume, like it can all fit together. And a really good example of that. Yeah, Shaw is
Love Shaw.
pretty dope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of favorite ride, like honestly, riding around that Tahoe midweek circuit, like that 1 kilometer little
Knew
loop,
he'd say that.
I friggin' love that so much.
Is it because you've done it so often?
I do his eyes closed.
Yeah, I think it's
Which way do you turn?
yeah, just keep going right. The year we couldn't race, like 2020 because of the pandemic, it really made me appreciate how much I love that race and how much I love the community if people come out and do it, and really enjoy being able to do something that I'm not naturally gifted at and don't have any real talent for, but can go there every Tuesday, can finish with the pack in the B race, can maybe struggle to get a top 10 if I get everything frigging right, and then hang out and watch my friends ride. And yeah, it's freaking, it's I love it. I really, really love it. So yeah, Shaw Street, midweek circuit, those are my two favorites.
All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of routes,
Yeah.
so what is the route to get to the race?
Oh goodness. Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah.
Let's hear this.
So there's a few.
This is where the advocacy really
Yeah.
kicks
Yeah.
in. I need to
Oh,
get
sure.
there. I need to get there.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is a great example of how it starts folding in together. So there's no great route because
I've looked at it
Yeah.
so many times.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
how do I get
because
over there?
because of the, again, it's a good way to summarize it, because of the very real challenges we have with the lack of cycling infrastructure, in the suburbs and connecting Toronto and Mississauga. So if you want to go, one of the lower stress routes would be to kind of get as far west as like Royal York, or which again is just paint, but it's at least a bike lane, or Scarlet Road, which has the protections off of Dundas, and go up to Eglinton. And Eglinton is mostly paths further west. That's kind of the best low stress route.
That gets you to Centennial.
Yeah, and gets you past Centennial.
Yeah.
The bike lane
And then you
shifts
have,
onto the other side.
Yeah,
and
it
gets you
goes
right
to Eastgate Parkway.
Yeah. So that's
can
the
slip in from
lowest
there.
stress route that I'd recommend for most people to do it. There are different routes if you are leaving the house last minute and you realize you're going to miss the race and you're just going to like bomb out as fast as you can.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the
Yeah,
one.
so Dundas West and Burnhamthorpe is the, like, I'm running late and I gotta get there, and I'm gonna just jet over the 407 or 427. Yeah.
Damn.
But even parts of that aren't terrible. They're not. It's not infrastructure, and it's not something I would recommend anyone.
Safety in numbers?
do.
Safety.
Yeah. So it's safety in numbers, and it's. I mean, there is something that when you're on, sometimes, not always, sometimes when you're on a road bike versus a commuter, the speed differential isn't quite as bad. And so I don't know if it objectively is safer, but it can feel a little bit safer because you're traveling at, say, 30, 35.
I do feel that.
Yeah, you're being past the car, hopefully not doing much more than 50.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel quite as scary as it
Yeah.
can when you're like, going through the city on a commuter and, you're going like maybe 15 and a car is whipping past you at whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. who knows what speed.
Right.
But very optimistic. Well, not optimistic. Happy that the Bloor Street bike lanes in Toronto are going to be extended out to Kipling.
Nice.
And
Wow.
so they'll be done. The first phase of it will start this summer. It'll go past Royal York.
Nice.
The next phase of it will be next year and get to Kipling in that 6 points
Yeah.
connection. So that'll get us further out.
Because that spot has some of those lanes that you were talking about that just
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
So that 6 points has this really like completely engineered like multiple bike lanes, and then it just
It all just ends.
It's like, good luck.
turns into Sharrows, and you go under the bridge. It's like
Yeah.
who knows what'll happen on the other side?
Yeah.
May not emerge. Yeah,
That's crazy.
But so that'll be good. And then Mississauga has also, I think they've approved it. It kept getting deferred. Bike lanes on Bloor Street on the Mississauga side.
Oh, cool.
So eventually there'll be this little gap between Toronto and Mississauga that will need to get filled, and
I
so
think just the highway crossing, right?
yeah, a little bit of
Yeah.
that. And so once that's done, it'll be pretty incredible. So that'll get us a lot closer to midweek for sure.
Yeah, I think I did the route from Scarborough,
Yep.
along Eglinton, and then down to I think Burnhamthorpe.
Yep.
On the way to Oakville,
Right.
just so happens.
Yep.
And that Burnhamthorpe Bloor is a little gray area, but
Yep.
once you jump onto Burnhamthorpe, it's like
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking Burnhamthorpe straight out to Burlington.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Oakville. Yeah.
and yeah, you're right.
It's like
At a
pretty-
certain speed, you're kind of like riding along with the car.
Yeah, and again, this is the sort of thing too, where it's like, this isn't like any kind of like route or infrastructure I'd recommend
Yeah.
for like, people who just want to get from point A to point B.
Yeah,
But
no.
they're the kinds of decisions that, once you start biking more and you want to do longer trips and
Yes.
you just start like making this kind of calculus and crossing your fingers that
Yeah.
you're not going to die.
I remember the first time, so I've done this trip like a few times now, but the first time I tried the around Toronto and was able to do Finch Corridor nicely, right? And then
Yeah.
over into Rouge,
Yeah.
and then you're on the Waterfront Trail, mostly down. And you end up in Etobicoke,
Yep.
and the whole plan falls apart.
Right.
Yep.
Because then you get up to, even when you get up to the airport,
Yeah.
between the airport and Downsview,
Yep.
which for my ride would have been like the last 15 kilometers,
Keel.
it's almost impossible.
Right.
Sketch.
Because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
Right?
So
and that's in a
sketchy.
neighborhood that is like predominantly lower income
Yep.
and would most likely be on
Would
bikes.
serve them
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot.
Oh,
yeah,
I know.
right?
Right?
Yeah.
So-
And like a
there's
lot.
no biking infrastructure for them.
Well, and the other thing too, it's like a lot there too. You've got the West Humber Trail,
Yep.
Yeah.
and you'll see people on bikes from the communities
Yep.
there too, and you realize like, oh man, if we could like get better connections for more people to get to this trail system, like then more people might start riding, and then you whetting their appetites. But like, and then imagine if we had like a protected bike lane, like up Kipling,
Yep.
or
Ooh,
like
up
like
Kipling, yep.
yeah, like
Or
or
Rexdale,
or-
yeah.
like, and then like yeah, it's not. And again, I think that's goes to the example of like you're maybe not just like dropping a bike lane in the middle of somewhere and not like engaging the community on
Right.
why it's happening, but if you're helping bridge those connections and do that sort of thing, it can be really transformational.
Yeah.
Mayor Chow, make it happen.
Yeah, there's so much potential.
So you might see some nomads at these races now. Now that we know how to get there safely.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we're building at the. That's why Cycle Toronto was advocating for the Bloor West extension was to get more nomads.
Specifically to get nomads
Specifically
there.
for us.
Yeah.
So, okay, so going back to y'all, like, so what are your favorite Reds? So we're all like Shaw fans, but like, Ian, do you have anything?
So I think with the recent advent of trying to be safe and trying to avoid traffic,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are discovering the Finch Corridor.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But I think the one that we're find ourselves connected to is the Beltline trails.
Right,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, the crossings. I wish it went further out west,
right.
but I know it's a rail trail, so you don't have much we can to build on top of that. But that one goes essentially across the city,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The odd major street crossover,
right.
Yep.
the rare light,
Right.
but something like that would be, personally my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I can't think of anything that we have that's like that anywhere else in the city,
Right.
right?
Yeah. I'm gonna give a different answer every time.
All right. It's good.
It's
It's good that there are options.
Yeah, gonna give us different every time. Shaw is definitely a tough act to follow because for me, Shaw was the way that I took heading home.
Right.
Like if I ended up downtown,
Yeah.
it'd be Shaw right up to like Davenport.
Yeah.
and then weaving through Witchwood. And,
Yeah.
Right. So
That's a climb.
the other ride that I really like is actually through Moore Park,
Okay, yeah.
which I think there's a debate about whether or not we could actually ride in there. Like, there's some locals that don't like bikes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I think it's the dog
Moore Park.
The
Dog
dog
park?
walk. Is that the one?
Yeah, there's an area there where there's like a dog walking.
Yeah,
park.
I think there's a section where it says like you cannot bike here. It's just for the dog walkers, and we're like, if it's really early or really
But if
late.
you're on the trail,
Yes.
I think you're fine if you stay on the trail, but you can't go on like the mountain bike trail.
Ah,
'Cause
yes.
that takes you through the dog park.
Yes.
But if you stay on that trail, that goes right into like Brickworks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love that part.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's a nice part of the trail. My favorite is obviously I love the Dawn Trail, going up around, going to Tommy.
Yeah.
But I love the waterfront trail going eastbound into Pickering.
Oh, yeah.
Like not the bike trail itself, like the
You mean
bike
like,
lane.
you mean the
Like
the,
little
the,
marker.
Rouge, the Rouge Hill part of it?
No, like the entire thing from like, just from
Like East Park.
Brimley
Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
Kingston Road.
Yeah.
Like going from there, following the little markers.
And like, so you're going through like that
Through the rest of the
subdivision.
neighborhood,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Going
Yeah.
through that
And
is
then
the
you do
most
that
fun
weird-
for me.
Parts of it are really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that's what started my bike adventures
Oh,
when I
wow.
was younger, and
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, "This is awesome."
Yeah, yeah.
This is
Like that's where there's that bridge with the canopy.
yeah,
Right.
The weeds over it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
riding
It's
on it,
like
yeah.
this is so much fun, and you go into it. There, I remember this one part. It's somewhere in Scarborough. I'm like looking up Google, telling me to turn somewhere, and I'm in a neighborhood.
Right.
I'm like, where the fuck is this turning point?
Right.
And it's literally between two houses.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where is it? I keep passing by these kids. They think
Right.
I'm creepy. And I'm like, no, man, I'm looking for something. Like, where's this trail? You know, I'm like, oh, it's right there. It's beside that house.
Right.
And then you go there, and it's literally a neighborhood. It's downhill, and then a ravine. At
Right.
the bottom of the ravine is
Fisherman's
neighborhoods.
Bay. I
Right.
think?
And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
no, just before that.
Okay.
Yeah, and you just
Yeah, I know
go
what you're
down
talking
that
about.
hill, and
Right.
it's
Yeah.
like super fast,
Yeah.
and then it exits into a neighborhood. And
Right.
you're looking for another marker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and that to me is so much fun. I've taken that all the way out to Ajax,
Right.
and it's like, and then I found out about the entire waterfront trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, yo, this goes around Lake Ontario just like this. Like, I want to do this.
Which Waterfront Trail is both my
Yeah.
one of the favorites and absolutely one of the least favorites.
Right.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Because like the whole Waterfront Trail up to that point
yeah,
is just a mess.
Right.
big mess.
Yeah.
Big
Because I guess I'm not sure how I feel about what they did at like Queen's Quay, for example,
Oh
where you have like a kind of sidewalk,
Right.
and then you have green,
Right.
and then you have a shared path
Yeah.
yeah,
both directions, a little bit of green, and then streetcars.
Yeah.
And people that are crossing have to cross all of
Yeah.
this.
yeah.
So I'm not sure how I feel about that because it's
It's-
like pretty dicey.
I mean, all of that is just like when all this was first built, like it was not designed to deal with like the like population volumes. Like we
Oh, yeah,
had
for
down-
sure.
Like so, it's infrastructure that's like way underbuilt for what's needed down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been really good if there'd been an opportunity to maybe consider removing a lane of traffic. And
Yeah.
you know, you've got
Yeah.
the streetcar there now too. So like, do people need to be able to drive both directions? Like,
Right.
maybe not.
Or do people need to be able to park on that road?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Like there's a parking
Yeah.
lot right there.
Exactly. The big one.
Yeah, why do you have to park on the road?
Yeah.
Really big one.
No parking. Park in there.
I do remember. So other than Shaw, the other one that like Bloor Danforth is like you know, my main like frigging ride. Like I'm so dependent on it to get like through the city in general. Like you know, when they the further that being extended both ways, it's just such a game changer in my life. But I remember back in 2020 when the city was, you know, doing the bikeway extension, and you know, when university first happened, and like sort of like we knew it was happening and we're really excited, and then I'm riding around Queen's Park for the first time with those protected bike lanes. That was one of those like mind-blowing things. Like I could not believe it was
Yeah.
happening.
Because certain parts of university would have a bike lane and then not. Right? Like
Yeah, right
right
down
on
to
Queen's
Adelaide.
Park.
yeah. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it needs that last connection, and it's
Yeah.
something we're advocating for. Is it needs that last connection, especially get to a Union Station.
Yeah.
Like you've got this great way to connect
Yep.
people. Like talking about last mile, like we've got this huge hub of like transit and go, and it's like
separated,
and it's
And
not
there's no
it's not connected. And you've got this like cycling arterial like university that can handle that kind of volume, and it's not connected.
And that spot in particular has really high traffic.
Yeah.
So it's like you really do need some cycling infrastructure there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right, we're just about getting done here. Michael, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Final words.
Final words.
Dropping an album.
What haven't I said?
You want to shout out anybody?
I know. Yeah. No.
Do you want to retract anything?
I was trying to think. I don't think I've said anything. I'm sure.
No,
I'm sure somebody will say, "I can't believe you said made a joke about paint as an infrastructure." For the record, I'm in favor of protected cycle tracks, and I think they should be the default in all arterials. So we have that.
There
on
we go.
record.
There we go.
I'm just saying,
On
Shaw
wax.
Street is dope, and that's also possible too.
Yep.
No, I think again, really happy to be chatting with y'all.
Yeah.
Really glad to be helping promote Cycle Toronto, maybe help shake up its image a little bit. And I think just one of the really important things too that I think that's really core to Cycle Toronto's work is, we know that not everyone will choose to ride a bike. Not every trip is bikeable, but the more safe transportation options that people have, ultimately the better, more livable city. And it's going to help with public health, with climate crisis, with traffic issues, and and frankly help with people's mental health too. I know during the pandemic, being able to go out and ride my bike was really helped keep me grounded, which in a lot of uncertain times. And
absolutely,
so it's a big part of helping keeping me sane and good, which is so glad to be able to talk about it.
Awesome.
Michael, thank you so much for
thanks.
joining us today.
Where can people connect with you? Cycle Toronto.
People can. I don't really publicize any of my stuff. People find me, but
the Cycle Toronto respond to DMs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So slide in those DMs.
Yeah. Cycle Toronto responds to things. Midweek's Instagram responds to things.
Okay.
Slide into the DMs.
Perfect.
Slide into the DMs.
Yeah. But and if you're at Midweek, the crit, come say hi. Cycle Toronto is doing pop-ups. We're around, say hi, and tell us. Don't be shy about telling us what we can do better, and what you want to see in your own neighborhoods.
I love it.
For sure.
Perfect.
And then we'll do something fun with Cycle Hamilton.
We're going to discuss.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to cover.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Michael Longfield, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna applaud myself too.
Fine, I'll clap.
So 33%. Yeah.
Hey, that's lower than our 85.
That's good.
That's it. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right, perfect. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace.